Welcome back guys, we are back with another story on. Rosalie kept bullying Bella until everything changed. Before that, more than 50% of our viewers haven't subscribed our channel yet. So do it now to stay updated and to be part of our 1000 family, so let's get started on story. Rosalie despised school, specifically high school, and she despised small town high schools even more. It wasn't the institute itself of the physical place, but high school housed her least favorite phase of a human's life, adolescence. It was when humans were their most hormonal, typically most shallow, and said the dumbest things ever. Small towns only added to the annoying behavior because nothing happened in small dreary towns named after utensils, therefore. When something did happen, it made everyone excited and therefore increased their annoying behavior. In this instance, the big thing was the pending arrival of the chief of police's one and only daughter 2 months into the school year. She almost felt bad for the girl as everyone gossiped about her, what she would be like, what she would look like, who would do her first, the list went on and on. She didn't feel bad because this time around Alice was excited and the conversation of the swan girl did not end when she left the high school. It wasn't the girl's fault that Alice was intrigued by the girl, and it wasn't her fault she'd somehow roped her other siblings into getting into it too, but that didn't change the fact that she already disliked the girl because of it. She's going to be late, Alice pouted as she eyed the entrance of the parking lot forlornly. I thought you couldn't see her, Anna noted as she glanced up from her and Edward's entwined hands. I can't, I can just feel it, Alice huffed with another pout. Just like how you can feel you're going to be best friends. Emmett smirked. Yes, Alice snapped. I challenge that, Victoria smirked as she traced her fingers against Emmett's bulging bicep. I already called dibs, Alice whined as she stomped her foot in protest. Perhaps you shouldn't call dibs on the human and let her be, Edward offered. No one asked you anything. Alice snapped before she buried her face into Jasper's chest, who only smiled down at his adorable mate and held her close. Sometimes being the only unmated vampire in the family annoyed the ever-loving shit out of her. This being one of those times. Edward gave her a sad look. They'd been the unmated two in the family until he had found Anna 20 years ago. They weren't close and more often than not they did not get along. But they had held an understanding for one another, being the only two single ones in a coven of mated vampires, but now she was on her own. She scoffed at the sad look he gave her, she found it annoying. She did not want nor need his pity or a mate for that matter, they touched far too much for her liking. The bell rang signaling the start of the school day and they removed themselves from the parking lot, following the throng of students into the building to start another mundane day of classes and mindless chatter. She grunted as she landed on the floor with a soft thud. She glared at the particular reason for her falling out of bed this morning. Her sheets were once again tangled around her legs. Of course, she huffed, lazily freeing herself before rising to her feet. Glancing to her right to check the clock, she cursed, realizing she'd outslept her alarm, or more than likely hadn't even set it to begin with last night. She stumbled her way to the bath, only tripping twice on her way across the hall, underwear and socks in hand. Her shower was quick and cold but did the job of fully waking her as she quickly pulled on her underwear and socks and skidded across the hall and back into her room to get dressed. She got dressed, grabbing a matching hat on the way out her room, book bag slung over her shoulder. Of course her good fortune quickly came to an end as she missed the steps and tumbled, executing a perfect tuck and rolled to her feet with all the grace of a world-class ballerina. Years of being deathly uncoordinated had taught her how to recover quickly, efficiently, and mostly gracefully from her falls, trips and spills with little to no damage to her person. Scrambling out the house, because really she should have left the house like 10 minutes ago. She shut the door and locked up before jumping into her car and driving off. Forks wasn't too small of a town where it had one main road that cut straight through the town, but that didn't make finding the high school difficult, because whoever had decided to design the roads of Forks was nice enough to think geometrically, and therefore there were no awkward turns or secret corners. Bella pulled into the emptying parking lot of Forks High and parked. She took a moment to breathe and gear herself up to speak with people for the day. She dragged her clammy hands against her jean-clad thighs and licked her lips. A habit she'd picked up over the years, adjusted her hat on her head and climbed out her car. She walked into her first class 20 minutes late and caught everyone's attention. She fought the urge to turn around and go hang herself in the nearest tree and decided instead to approach the teacher who looked like his tie was forcing him to imitate Mr. Mackey. She ignore. Ed the gaping as she quickly took her seat in the back. It was physics and thankfully something she'd already been doing in Phoenix, so she was not lost as the class continued on until the bell rang. Quote, "I expect you to be on time to my class from now on, Ms. Swan." Mr. Granger noted sharply as he signed her slip signaling she had in fact made it to his class. "Yes sir," she nodded. She didn't tell him had her enjoyment of being asleep would probably end up making her late at least a few more times before the semester was out. He probably wouldn't take it well, and she wasn't that oblivious when it came to human interaction. Her morning went by relatively quickly except for the need for every teacher to have her introduce herself to the class. She told them the most basic things needed and then found the open seat. Thankfully always in the back as to limit the blatant staring coming her way. By lunchtime, despite her best efforts, a group of kids had already attached themselves to her. Althaug. She supposed she should be grateful that she didn't have to go through the embarrassing act of roaming around a packed lunchroom trying to figure out seating arrangements. The first person she met was a guy named Eric Yorkie, short, of clear Asian descent, with a bit of an acne problem and the bright idea of making her the school's front page news. Thankfully she was able to talk him out of that bright idea. She did not want any attention, and front page news, even if for a high school paper, was the very opposite of no attention. He then introduced her to a one Mike Newton. He was baby-faced, blue-eyed, with gelled hair and clearly would be a problem. He reminded her of a puppy dog with his eager attitude, which was fine but unless she was reading the signs wrong, which she just fucking might be. He was trying to flirt with her and that was not good. Shortly after that revelation she met Jessica Stanley and Lauren Mallory and instantly hated them both. Well, no, she hated Lauren. She was a bitter bitch who clearly didn't like sharing the limelight. Bella wanted no fucking part of anyway. Jessica, she kind of disliked. The girl was genuine, for sure, sweet and stuff, but shish. Talked a mile a minute and never stopped. Not to mention all of her questions were far too personal and clearly designed so she'd have stuff to add to the school's grapevine. Angela Weber was the last person she met of the group of friends before lunch. She liked the girl as she was quiet and soft-spoken but genuine. She introduced herself and then didn't proceed to bombard Bella with words as if the introduction was enough to fabricate years of friendship that did not exist. Bella reluctantly followed behind Jessica, who was yammering on as they headed for the cafeteria. She was hungry as hell, having skipped breakfast for obvious reasons. Said appetite quick dissolved into nothing at the sight of the food before her. She dare not put it on her tray should it choose to revolt and attack the school for eating its brethren, because that was not food. She skipped the salad with lettuce that looked chewy and grabbed an apple, cookie and bottle of water before following the others to the table. She sat next to Angela and was introduced to two other people, Tyler and Ben. The latter of which had a clear crush on Angela unless she was reading that wrong again, because she sucked at the people thing and reading them. She happily faded into the background as the group of friends chatted about. She didn't even fucking know, she just wanted to go home and raid the fridge for food and then possibly a nap. Although she probably should work out somewhere in there. She grunted. Charlie had workout equipment from a time when he cared about not having a beer belly, but now some of the stuff looked to be rusted to the floor and walls. She was brought out of her musings by the silence that fell over the once boisterous lunch room. Looking up expecting to see Jesus or some other miracle worker, Bella was confused. There was no Jesus, just a mob of insanely attractive teenagers. She really didn't get why all the talking stopped as everyone followed them with their eyes as they moved towards the lunch lines. Clearly planning to collect the questionable thing this school tried to pass off as food, the fools. Are they famous or something? Bella questioned as she glanced at Angela. In Forks. They might as well be. Angela shrugged. Her course that was all Jessica needed to hear to start in on the gossip as the cafeteria picked back up in their noise level. Those are the illustrious Cullens, Dr. and Mrs. Cullen's adopted kids. They moved here last year from Alaska. The shortest one with the short black hair is Alice Cullen, Jessica explained, and while she didn't want to play into Sizika's clear addiction to gossiping, she needed to sat her own curiosity, so she looked and quickly singled out the one named Alice. She was a beautiful pixie little thing, more than likely just over 5 feet. Crazily pale, but so were her other siblings. She danced everywhere gracefully and clearly energetic, but charmingly so. She's nice enough, a bit weird if you ask me, and spaces out sometimes. She frowned. She didn't like the way Jessica talked about the girl. The girl was clearly just misunderstood. She would know since she's the fucking weird one. The tall blonde she's holding hands with, looks really stiff and in pain as Jasper Hale. She spotted the owner of the hand Alice held. Somewhere around 6 feet 3 inches. He didn't look so much in pain as he did like he was trying to contain himself and not be overwhelmed by something. What that something was, she had no idea, but it really wasn't any of her business. The giant guy, with all the muscles and the dimples, is Emmett McCarthy. He's nice enough. She easily spotted the guy. He was just a tad taller than Jasper, probably 6 feet 4 inches, with the build of a linebacker, which in itself would have been intimidating if it were not for the giant dimpled smile on his face and the childish glint in his eyes. The girl with the crazy red hair is Victoria Manor. She's creepy, but she doesn't talk very much to anyone outside of her family, Jessica added. He redhead who looked about 5 feet 8 inches did look wild, and there was something crazily feline about her gait, but she looked just as playful as Emmett and Alice did, just in her own special way. The brunette girl is Emmett's little sister, Anna McCarthy. She's nice but a little standoffish, acts like she's too good for anyone, Jessica added. Something told Bella, the girl who was just a bit taller than Alice at probably about 5 feet 4 inches, had shot down Jessica's attempts at friendship multiple times. The girl was just as beautiful and just as pale as her other siblings. The guy with the crazy bronze hair is Alice's brother, Edward Cullen. No one is good enough for him to talk to. He was holding Anna's hand, the shortest of his brothers but not by much, probably 6 feet 1 inch or so. He was also the lankiest of all his brothers. She also expected by Jessica's tone she'd already tried and been shot down in that front as well. The guy looked a bit on the snobbish side, but she tried her best not to judge. Maybe the was a reason he was rocking the disapproving eyes and permascowl. And the blonde girl is Jasper's twin sister, Rosalie Hale, the biggest bitch to have ever existed in ever. Bella knew the girl was Alking, but she hadn't heard anything past the blonde goddess's name. She was about 5 feet 8 inches, and while her figure was indeed very bombshell-esque, all womanly curves and such, it was her face that captured Bella. Framed by silky-looking golden locks, her face looked to have been sculpted by God himself. She'd never seen a sneer so beautiful or the snobbish upturn of a nose look so enchanting. The girl's glare could clearly reduce a man to tears, but Bella kind of felt honored to have them looking her way. She did her best to hide the smile as the blonde goddess glared harder. It was so beautiful, her golden eyes piercing and fiery. Don't waste your time, they're all together. Like Alice is dating Jasper, Victoria and Emmett are together, and so are Edward and Anna. Rosalie is the only single one. Clearly the only normal one there, Jessica added. She ignored them as they delved into a debate about whether or not it was incest or not. She really didn't care. Rosalie was single and that's all that mattered. Hey, maybe you're finally losing your touch, Rosie, Emmett guffawed, because Rosalie was clearly trying to burn the swan girl with her eyes, but the message was clearly not being portrayed by the looks of the awestruck girl. Rosalie growled and leveled a glare that had his laughter dying away and his balls shriveling back up into his gut. Never mind, he grunted, looking anywhere but at his angry best friend. One of these days he'd learn to keep his mouth shut. No you won't, Edward smirked as he glanced at his brother. Shut up, Emmett grunted. Alice eyed the girl who she'd been excited about. She was gorgeous, far better looking than any human she'd ever come across, and right on par with a vampire. She had a kind of universal face that could attract both males and females, whether they swung that way or not, in droves. Framed by long rich mahogany brown hair tucked under a hat. Her face had sharp features, but there was a roundness to it that promised dimples, and pouty cupid bow lips. There was a light near non-existent dusting of freckles over her nose that made her equal parts adorable and drop-dead gorgeous. Her eyes, which were framed by long and bountiful eyelashes, without an ounce of mascara, were a piercing and exotic silver. Their almond shape gave her eyes a distinctly mischievous and feline look. The bell rung and the girl's friends alerted her to such a fact. She didn't expect the girl to be so tall. Easily 6 feet as she rose from her seat, with an athletic build with the perfect amount of curves. Well, at least she's a hot Amazon, Emmett grinned, only for the smile to immediately die on his lips as Rosalie shot him another withering look. He's right, Alice, I'm ignoring your dibs from earlier, Victoria declared. What? No. Alice hissed, Bella would be her best friend. She could feel it and her feelings were just as accurate when her visions came short. 2 weeks into Bella's arrival and all that came of Alice's quest to befriend Bella was questions. Like why they could not hear her heartbeat when she clearly had a pulse, why they could not smell the girl at all as if she had no scent, why they couldn't hear her breathing even though she clearly was. Or why Jasper couldn't read her or alter her emotions, Edward couldn't read her mind, Alice still couldn't see her future, or why Rosalie couldn't see any physical weaknesses in the girl. Edward hadn't said a word to the girl much outside of things pertaining to the class even though he was her lab partner and had the perfect opportunity. Not that she was much to talk, she shared an art class with Bella during their final period of classes and she hadn't said anything either, until now that is. Alice approached the girl lounging in her seat. The girl had style, it wasn't as girly as hers. It was actually a little boyish but fit her well. She had that whole tomboy flair about her but it worked for Bella. Hi, Alice chirped as she took her new seat next to the girl in the back of the room. She was uncharacteristically nervous as the girl's silver eyes dragged up to her. Sometimes they were a bit unnerving, it made Bella seem like other even though she wasn't. Hello little one, the taller brunette grinned. The girl looked nervous and she wanted to put her at ease, and short people were the most protective over their heights. I'm not little, I'm normal-sized, Alice huffed after S. He got over the sound of Bella's voice that reminded her of a smooth jazz with a little rasp. She'd forgotten how entrancing it was because the girl didn't talk often. Fun-sized, I agree. Normal-sized. Let's agree to disagree. Alice. But you already knew that. I like to hear things from the source. I like that, my family doesn't get that opportunity very often. It's easier to assume than to ask. Yeah, I guess so. Plus people suck. I love your bow by the way, she smiled as she eyed the bow in Alice's hair. Thank you, Emmett's been teasing me about it all day. Just jealous he can't pull L off a bow, Bella smirked with a shrug that caused Alice to giggle. So how's life in Forks? Very different from Phoenix, but appreciated. Really? Yup, my pale ass makes sense in this climate, ow. Ice giggled but nodded because Bella's skin was nearly as pale as their own. They talked for the entirety of the class which Alice truly appreciated because it was clear that Bella wasn't much of a talker, but she made the effort for Alice which warmed the shorter vampire. She also found Bella's constant fidgeting adorable. She had a penchant for licking her lips which, even to the mated, Alice found attractive. In fact she'd caught quite a few people staring at Bella's lips when she licked them. The girl had a way about just capturing attention, which she found hilariously ironic seeing as though Bella clearly hated attention of any sort directed at her. She walked with Bella to the parking lot to Bella's pristine black 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda, something she only knew because Emmett, Jasper, and reluctantly Rosalie had raved about it on the ride home the first day they saw it. Conveniently, Bella had parked only a space away. Alice, aren't you going to introduce us to your new friend? Victoria smirked loud enough for Bella to hear and look up from the ground to ensure she didn't trip over anything like her own 2 feet or a rogue piece of air. Bella, this is my family, Alice Gree. NNED. Although it was a bit forced to her, although she wasn't good at reading facial expressions either, Alice rattled off her family's names each giving their own greeting, some more enthusiastic than others except for Rosalie who gifted her once again with the most beautiful glare she'd ever seen. Alice watched as everyone's eyes zeroed in on the slow and sensual movement of Bella's tongue across her lips before she released her bottom lip with a soft pop. Bella's hand rubbed against her jean-clad thigh as she gave them an awkward wave. Hi. Oh, I like you, you seem like fun, Victoria Practic. Allied purred as she stalked forward stopping at the quiet but possessive growl that left Rosalie. The redhead glanced back at her blonde sister in question only to be outrightly ignored, causing the redhead to grin and turn back to face an uncomfortable-looking Bella. She'd never met someone who looked just as adorably awkward as she looked sexy. Thanks. Bella grunted reaching up to scratch the back of her neck nervously. Oh, you're more than welcome, Victoria winked before she was stepping back into Emmett's arms. Right, I guess I'll see you around then, Bella nodded reaching blindly for her door handle. Wait, Bella, Alice declared, narrowly stopping the taller brunette from throwing herself into her car and taking off. "Yeah," Bella questioned as she glanced down to Alice only to be engulfed in strong cool arms. "Bye," Alice replied as released Bella before the girl could panic at the physical contact. "Bye little one," Bella smiled, patting Alice's head somewhat awkwardly before taking off. "Victoria, you scared her," Alice whined. "Never mind that, what was the growl, dear sister of mine?" Victoria grinned as she turned to glance at Rosalie. "Annoyance, let's go," Rosalie snapped, climbing into her car and starting it. "Funny way for you to pronounce jealousy," Victoria smirked. "Goodbye," Rosalie stated before pulling off and leaving them all to fit 6 people in Edward's 5-seater Volvo. "You could have waited until we were in the car to pester her," Anna huffed as she climbed into the passenger seat of Edward's Volvo. "What, so she could pull another Vancouver? I rather not," Victoria huffed referring to the time Emmett had annoyed Rosalie so thoroughly she jumped out of the moving car she'd been driving and watched them crash into the surrounding woods with a morbid sense of satisfaction. In justification plastered proudly on her face. "That wasn't her car," Edward pointed out. "Fuck, you're right," Victoria huffed as she slipped into the middle back seat. She hated the middle hump, they were not made with legs in mind. When they arrived home, Esme glanced at them from the top of the stairs. "I suggest none of you enter the woods tonight, you may not return whole. You just had to go and tease her," Edward sighed as he glanced at Victoria. "Oh hush, quit being so melodramatic, she'll be fine. She simply just doesn't want to admit that my little bird intrigues her," Victoria grinned. "Allie," he hissed as she leapt at the taller redhead, "I called dibs first." "I thought we agreed to not call dibs on the human," Jasper voiced. Alice really was difficult to subdue. "That was never agreed upon." Victoria huffed with a roll of her eyes as she easily dodged Alice's limited swings from Jasper's hold. "I like her, she's like a jelly bean," Emmett grinned. "What does that even mean?" Anna questioned, glancing up at the giant vampire. "She's all tough and gooey." "The hell are you talking about?" "Shut up, she's my jelly and you're just jealous," Emmett huffed. He squealed as Alice landed on him, looking much like a deranged koala bear attacking a tree. "You can't have her, I called dibs," Alice hissed, flailing as Emmett held her away from his face with outstretched arms. "Can we not call dibs on the innocent human, please?" Edward demanded. "I agree, I'm disregarding your dibs anyway, Alice. She will be my little bird," Victoria nodded. "She's taller than all of you and that's not what I meant, Vic," Edward huffed. "No one asked you anything, Edward," Victoria huffed with a wave of her hand. "I'm done. Esme, can you please tell these people it's not polite to call dibs on humans?" Edward declared. "It's not polite to call dibs on humans," Esme repeated as she disappeared around the corner. "See?" Edward grinned triumphantly. "Of course it's not polite, it's just necessary. So people don't try to steal our best friend," Alice huffed, giving Emmett and Victoria a glare that would do Rosalie proud. "Who exactly is the human we are calling dibs on?" Esme questioned, reappearing. "My jelly, she's the best," Emmett grinned. "Chief Swan's daughter Isabella," Jasper supplied to a confused Esme. "Bella, she likes being called Bella and she's my best friend," Alice declared, sticking a tongue out at Emmett triumphantly. "Because you called dibs," Esme supplied. "Yes, Alice, honey, that's not how that works. I know, but I have to make sure the rest of these vultures back off. Because they like her too. Yes, everyone wants a piece of Bella. She's amazing, Esme, and gorgeous and so adorable. Right, a little competition is good for the soul, Alice. I'm totally winning jelly," Emmett declared, his fist flying into the air. "She will be my little bird," Victoria nodded. "My best friend," Alice glared at the two of them before they were all gone, heading to their rooms, leaving only Jasper, Edward, and Anna. "That poor girl," Esme mused. "Yeah, you just sick the 3 craziest people in the house on her," Jasper noted. "Do keep me informed," Esme added. "Yes ma'am," Jasper nodded with a smile as he dropped a kiss on her forehead before disappearing to go see about an awfully quiet Alice. "He's my favorite," Esme mused. "Nonsense," Anna huffed, kissing Esme's cheek before disappearing up the steps. "Don't look at me, you. Read the least," Esme smiled as she looked away from Edward. He chuckled and placed a kiss on her temple. "Love you," he murmured before he was gone and heading for his room. Esme hummed, as she headed upstairs to her office. That poor Swan girl. Bella grunted as she sat in her seat. Even after 3 weeks of being at the school and having to see the disgrace they tried to pass off as food, she was LL perturbed every time she had to settle for an apple and a bottle of water. Why don't you bring a lunch? Angela asked quietly, having already noticed her utter hatred for the Forks High food. She'd learned her lesson after she'd gotten sick in 5th grade eating some foul-smelling chili. I sleep too much for that, Bella yawned, so she said, but she hadn't gotten much sleep last night thanks to a certain blonde with the beautiful glare. You don't look like you got much sleep last night. Which only makes it worse. What kept you up? Angela questioned as if she was afraid to really know the answer or didn't want to overstep her boundaries. Again, Bella wasn't really sure about these things. She glanced over at their table anyway, noting with disappointment that her blonde beauty was not glaring at her but rather at someone else, Alice, who was waving at her. Despite her own disappointment and jealousy that Rosalie's glare was directed at someone else other than her, she waved. Little one was growing on her a lot. Plus she fed her in art class and food was always good. When did you get all buddy-buddy with the Cullens? Jessica demanded. She kind of sounded miffed. Maybe. Who the fuck knew? Bella sure didn't. Edward is in my biology class and I have art with Alice. Bella shrugged. She was more concerned with the supposed mashed potatoes on Ben's tray that seemed to have winked at her on multiple occasions already. I know that, but they talk to you. Alice does. Not good enough for Edward. Lauren smirked. Bella didn't know much, but she knew a bitter bitch when she saw a bitter bitch, and the bitch was bitter. Although she kept it to herself because Ms. Nan taught her to not be a mean and hurtful bitch unless outrightly provoked. Don't know, seems like he's in his head a lot, Bella shrugged. Okay, that time it had blinked. She knew when the fuck to get out of Dodge. I'll catch you guys later. She had been chosen to live because she had not partaken in the consuming of its kinmen. She was sure it would be small scale and others would soon be warned. Ms. Nan also never taught her to let anyone she was with get jumped. She flagged down Alice, gestured to the food and mouthed run before leaving herself. She'd done her job and her glaring beauty would be safe to glare at her another day. She left the vicinity of the cafeteria not wanting to hear the soon coming EAMS of her fellow classmates being slaughtered by the substances they'd so stupidly eaten. Ms. Nan told her she wasn't supposed to take so much pleasure in someone else's displeasure all the time. Shish. Disagreed, but she hated getting popped with that damn wooden spoon. Damn thing didn't even hurt, just fucking stung like a bitch, and now she was bitter again. She also missed Ms. Nan and the others and the food. She really missed the food. Also, she wanted to sleep, except the bell just rung and she hadn't heard any screams, so maybe the glob was playing her and was only practicing to make sure he wouldn't miss the signal the moment it actually went down and they decided to strike. It was a smart blob and she should have probably taken its earlier winks far more serious. Edward eyed the girl. His siblings were so eager to interact with. She was nothing special, except she was something special. She was taller than most girls and nearly as tall as him with her 6 feet height. Her beauty was on par with that of vampire, and in many cases she had most of them beat. He'd never met a mind he couldn't read, but hers was silent. It wasn't so much a void as it was non-existent. It didn't even feel like there was a mind there for him to even attempt to read. Outside of physically seeing the girl, she was invisible, because for someone as clumsy as she clearly demonstrated herself to be at times, her steps were silent no matter the circumstances, and her recoveries were the most graceful things he'd ever witnessed. No heartbeat thundered in her chest, yet the pulse point it created was blatant, and Alice assured them it was there from her hugs with the mysterious girl as she'd felt Bella's heart beating through her chest. There was no scent to bother him. Sometimes other scents clung to her, but depending on her length of exposure to them, they often dissipated shortly thereafter, and she was once again invisible to the nose. She could easily disappear into a crowd. Everything about her worked in her favor except the fact that Bella seemed to draw people in like a moth to a flame, and she was non-discriminatory about it. According to Jasper, each sporting varying levels of lust, attraction, and intrigue. Bella was a recurring theme for every mind in school. Those that didn't talk to her wanted to, if not to just be graced with her presence for a little bit. Bella had a clear group of friends, and she was clearly awkward, but he had to admit it was charming in a way. he found himself even in this instance drawn to her, an irrevocable need to simply just interact with her. He decided to bite the bullet. Because it was clear she was going to be a part of their life no matter his protest for interacting with a human, no matter her quirks. There was so much that could go wrong, but he couldn't find it in himself to resist her presence anymore. Hello, my name is Edward Cullen. It wasn't the best introduction, but it was all he could come up with. We're partners, I know that already. Right. I apologize for not being very sociable. Yeah, okay. So how exactly are you enjoying Forks so far? It's pretty nice, the weather suits me, not my sneakers though, Edward had noticed. She seemed to have an affinity for the more expensive sneaker brands like Jordans, Nikes, Vans and Adidas, most of which looked pristine. Why? I was raised to respect the J's. But they're sneakers, they're supposed to get dirty. Within reason. What reasons would that be? Very few. No wonder you and Alice get along. No, she's obsessed with fashion. I just really like sneakers. You dress stylishly. If it matches and I'm comfortable, I wear it. Are those your only two requirements? Yup. Yeah, not like Alice at all. She wants to go shopping. Don't do it. Yeah, she kind of looked a little rabid when she mentioned it. It could in many cases be considered a violation of our constitutional rights. Oh damn. Indeed. By the time class ended, he understood what the fuss was about. Bella could hold a rather intelligent conversation, all while adding a sense of light-hearted charm to it. He also somehow found her fidgeting endearing, as it never seemed to really distract her. He'd felt like he had 100% of her attention at all times. For someone so clearly awkward and uncomfortable with social interactions, she was a natural at it. Oh, Anna smiled up at him, he could how happy and genuine he sounded, bidding Bella a farewell as they went their separate ways in her mind. She is surprisingly pleasant to talk to. What about her possibly finding out about us? I am against turning anyone, but I do not wish her dead. She'd be an amazing addition to the family if it came to that. So should I expect you to start calling dibs on her as well? No, not quite yet, he chuckled. He had the sneaking suspicion she'd be part of their lives sooner or later, and in a very permanent way. Rosalie glared partially in disbelief but mostly in annoyance at the sight before her. You've got to be kidding me, she huffed as she watched Alice lead the idiot human across the parking lot, handing her baby carrot after baby carrot. Hey Jelly, Emmett grinned, scooping up the girl or the entirety of the parking lot to see and look on in wonder. Hi Bear, Bella huffed with a small smile as she hugged him back. Put me down, Alice has noms. I win, Alice grinned, handing Bella another carrot triumphantly. Hi Red, Bella waved at Victoria as she offered Edward a fist bump. He looked awkward as he returned the gesture. How is my little bird? Victoria purred softly, flicking Bella's nose. Alice brought noms. Do you have noms? Bella questioned, lowering her body until she was staring into Victoria's eyes. I do, Victoria smiled, presenting a double chocolate chip cookie. Ah yes. Bella mumbled, taking the cookie and cradling it to her chest carefully. Bye little one, Bella mumbled, pressing a kiss to Alice's nose before waving a farewell to them all before she headed for her car. Rosalie glared as she watched the idiot human retreat before stopping and turning around and heading back to them. Sorry, rude, Bella mumbled before she turned to face Anna. Hello, my name is Isabella Swan, please call me Bella. Anna's eyes widened. She'd been pleased to stay in the background and watch her siblings fawn over the girl, all the while forgetting to introduce the others so that they wouldn't try to steal Bella from them. Anna, I've heard a lot about you, she smiled, shaking the outstretched hand. Okay, but I don't snore, little one is lying. But you were snoring, I heard you, Alice giggled. Not proof. Just claim, Bella replied indignantly as she turned to face Jasper. Bella, little one coos about you all the time, I'm too much of a mush hater to really appreciate it, Bella informed Jasper, who only grinned and squeezed his little mate into his side as he reached out to shake the offered hand. Jasper, she's called dibs on you, I love her too much to be upset with her happiness. Little one is love, I agree. You're mushy though, makes sense. Only for her. I agree, Bella nodded as she turned to Rosalie, and her glare, it made her heart flutter. It was such a beautiful glare, and up this close she could see the golden flames as they danced dangerously before her. I don't care, Rosalie hissed, cutting off Bella before she could begin to speak, climbing into her car and ignoring the taller brunette with a goofy grin on her face. "Little one," Bella noted as she began to backpedal and head for her car. "Yeah, we'll be sister-in-laws one day. I've never seen a more beautiful glare." "Okay," Alice chirped happily as she waved as Bella turned and jogged back to her car and drove off. Emmett peeked into Rosalie's car to see the blonde's startled face and guffawed. He couldn't believe it. The girl called Rosalie's best glare beautiful. This time the blonde vampire in question didn't even bother to bid them a farewell as she drove off, leaving all of them to pile into Emmett's Jeep this time. "Fuck, not again," Anna grouched. "Emmett, you're sitting in the back," Alice chirped as she hopped up and into the Jeep. "But it's my car," he whined as Victoria slipped the keys out of his pocket. "Yes, but you were the reason Rosalie left this time," Edward shrugged. "How do you know? It could have been because of Jelly." Mind reader, Edward was of course lying. The moment the words had registered for the blonde, her mind had went utterly and totally blank. Not only had Bella rendered the blonde speechless, but she'd also managed to render her thoughtless. He'd never known it possible until today. By the time they returned home, Rosalie was nowhere to be seen, having already parked her car and disappeared into the woods. "Is there a particular reason why your sister came home grumbling about viciously murdering the swan idiot, as she put it?" Esme questioned, looking up from her magazine. "You've got to listen to what Jelly said in the parking lot," Emmett excitedly declared before delving into the story. Esme listened, her eyes widening. The girl either truly had to be an idiot or somehow in love with Rosalie, because only love could make another person so blind. Does it actually have any hope? She was so ready to see Rosalie find her mate. Her daughter had suffered enough. "We don't know, none of our powers work on Bella, and today was the first time they directly interacted with one another." Edward shrugged. Of course they could infer about Rosalie since they could read her mind, see her future, and sense her emotions, but her own power made it hard to pinpoint her most of the time, never mind when she was actively trying to avoid a particular subject. "I think it'd be perfect. Jelly would annoy Rosalie and she'd probably want to kill her a lot, but they and hate dance along the same line all the time." Emmett shrugged. "That sounds like the most unstable relationship I've ever heard of," Esme noted. "Yeah, but exciting, and Rosalie isn't easy, and if you met Bella, you'd see it too." Alice smiled, getting excited. She was thinking of playing matchmaker. "Do you think that's for the best? I rather enjoyed Bella and I's conversation, and I'd like to have more, which would be impossible if Rosalie murdered her," Edward noted. "It'll be fine," Alice grinned with a wave of her hand before she disappeared up the steps. Everything was not fine. She had yet to return home since she'd dropped off her car because she needed to not be in the same state as the idiot human she wanted to murder. She hissed, uprooting a tree at the pain that accompanied that thought process. "Fucking Isabella Swan." Bella grunted as she rose from the last and newly exchanged winter tires. She was not happy for several reasons. The first being her having to wake up early so she would even have enough time to change the tires. The second being the lack of food in her stomach because Charlie was incapable of going to the grocery store when it was obvious it was needed. The third being her nearly giving herself a concussion on the patch of ice on the porch on her way out this fine fucking morning. Isabella wasn't one to wallow in a bad mood, but if she had been getting enough sleep lately and the food wasn't sorely lacking, none of this would be happening. She knew she was kind of being a baby, but her mind bounced constantly and her inability to focus was bordering on the levels of insanity. She fished out her phone and dialed the first of several newly added numbers. "Hello," Alice chirped. "Little one." Alice frowned. Bella sounded delirious and pouty. "Yes, Bella, it's me. I'm hungry and sleepy. Can't focus, I hit my head, might be something. Are you home?" "Yup, Riley has new shoes. She's modeling for me. Emmett and I are coming to get you." "I'll just sit here, Riley dance for me," Bella mumbled. The thong song by Cisco cut on from somewhere and Edward chuckled at the ridiculousness of it all. "I know you're not a truck, Riley." "We'll be back in a bit," Alice giggled as Emmett drove off. "Who is Riley?" Anna questioned. "Her car," Edward chuckled. He ignored Rosalie's eye twitch. They never meant anything good for anyone. He'd made her eye twitch once, it hadn't ended well for him. "Alice says she hasn't been sleeping well lately," Jasper noted. He knew practically everything about Bella already because of his little mate. She's become rather restless. She texted me at 2 in the morning to tell me foxes were real-life cat dogs. She then followed that up with hiding my booty hole from the dolphins because they can't be trusted. Victoria smiled, she'd loved every single moment of it. What about the hunger thing? Anna questioned, choosing to ignore the weird text conversations her sister had with the equally weird human. She's always hungry, hence why we bring her snacks, Victoria explained. Why does she call it noms? Anna questioned. She didn't call them snacks, not once, ever. The Cookie Monster, Jasper chuckled, he'd ask the same question. What? The Cookie Monster gets a cookie. He goes nom nom nom, hence noms. Is there something wrong with her? No, she's just got a unique outlook on life, Jasper explained with a chuckle. He liked the girl. She made Alice happy and he'd never seen someone so unbothered before by anything. One would have to be completely unbothered with life to view Rosalie's glares as beautiful, even after recognizing the fire in them. The closet romantic Alice had turned him into thanks to her obsession with chick flicks, hoped that this would all somehow work out and Bella would be Rosalie's mate. The fact that Rosalie had not even attempted to murder the girl was a very good sign in his book. Emmett's Jeep re-entered the parking lot for the second time that day, playing Get It On Tonight by Montel Jordan. He hadn't heard the song in a while, knowing that Emmett enjoyed R&B the most out of the entire house. He waved at them with a grin. He could feel Alice's amusement tickling him as the Y parked and she climbed out and skipped to his side. Emmett opened the door for Bella, who hopped out with a rather large bag of McDonald's, his nose scrunched up as fast food smelled particularly rancid to them. Of course, the offending smell was quickly forgotten as he noticed Bella's impressive dance moves as she munched on something. Emmett of course joined her because his brother had poor impulse control as they did hip thrust. And as the song ended, he watched Bella execute a perfect spin on her toe in a pair of Timberlands of all things. Bravo, Victoria chuckled. Thanks, Red, Bella smiled as she finished the bag of food. Better now. Still sleepy. Poor little bird. MMHMM, little one is mean to me. How so? I slipped on the ice, she laughed at me. I changed my shoes, Bella huffed triumphantly. I giggled, Alice pouted. She bought me noms, so all is forgiven, Bella mumbled, reaching over to pat Alice's head affectionately. That was me, Emmett huffed. Oh, I take it back, Bella replied. As she took her hand away from Alice's head. You'll forgive me at lunchtime, Alice replied matter-of-factly. Probably, Bella agreed as the bell rang. By lunchtime, Bella had already slept through most of her morning classes, only managing to stay awake for the first 5 minutes maximum. Dude, Mrs. Granger complained about you all class, Mike grinned as Bella walked up to the lunch table. Yeah, you've been out cold in every class. Someone keeping you up. Eric chuckled, although the running bet was she was stealing Alice from Jasper. Mike and Lauren thought for sure it was Emmett, and Tyler was betting on Victoria. Jessica had her money on Edward after seeing them talk in class non-stop after weeks of not saying anything to one another, and Angela had simply told them they were all wrong, and Rosalie was who Bella liked, but she hadn't made a bet, so her opinion didn't matter. More importantly, how did you get the Cullens to come pick you up and Emmett to dance with you? Jessica questioned. Did they know you're playing all of them? Lauren sneered, but it soon fell as Alice skipped over. She didn't need a bad representative with his sister if she hoped to steal Emmett from that clearly crazy Victoria chick. She watched as Alice didn't say a word as she simply slipped into Bella's lap, who in turn said nothing but simply adjusted the smaller girl into a more comfortable position on her lap. I was sleepy and hungry. Emmett came and got me and then fed me, Bella replied to Jessica's question, catching them all off guard. Alice too. Alice giggled as she brandished the lunch she'd asked Esme to make for Bella last night. Alice too, Bella grinned as she pressed a kiss to Alice's hair as she happily brandished the sub and the small salad triumphantly. Alice stayed in Bella's lap, happy to tall Kay with Angela and mess with Bella's hat while the others stared on in partial wonder and disbelief while she ate. It was a wonder how pliable and cooperative Bella could be with food. She would not be this willing to let Alice mess with her hat if she wasn't being fed. The bell rung and Alice hopped off Bella's lap with a smile, pecking the taller girl's cheek and bidding her a farewell as she skipped off to walk with Jasper to class. Are you guys a thing now? Eric questioned curiously. Maybe they were in some weird-ass polyamory relationship. It was weird but also kind of hot. Like a couple. She looked kind of queasy. Yeah. No. Alice's goodness and off limits. Never say something like that again. I think I'm going to be sick, Bella mumbled as she walked away. Alice was beautiful and amazing and perfect, but Alice was her best friend and made perfectly for Jasper. The thought of her being with anyone else was ridiculous to think of. Plus Rosalie clearly wasn't the sharing type and neither was she. They were trying to get her killed or something. Bella left the main office in confusion. She and Charlie barely acknowledged the existence of one another on a day-to-day basis. She did not expect him to have the station to call ahead and inform her that he'd be in Tacoma for an annual workshop for a week. Of course, she quickly got over her confusion because no, Charlie meant very good things for her. These things included not having to pretend she was full so Charlie would have food to eat, no one drinking her orange soda, and being able to utilize the TV instead of staring at the wall when she couldn't inevitably sleep tonight. She spotted Alice and the others waiting by the car as they were her ride home. She'd have to apologize to Riley later for just leaving her hanging after giving her a new pair of shoes. She made note of the slick patches of ice thanks to the rain and the cold, even though November had just begun and therefore shouldn't be this cold. She slowed down, not willing to break her neck in attempts to get to the bag of baby carrots Alice was waving at her. It pained her to prolong the enjoyment of food but knew it was for the best. She couldn't enjoy the carrots if she had a broken neck. Ms. Nan had taught her that, and Ms. Nan knew everything there was to know about anything. The telltale sound of tires screeching against ice met Bella's ears and she frowned because looking at the horror that crossed Alice and the other's face, it meant nothing good for her. She turned just in time to see Tyler's ugly-ass van smack into her and send her flying. Alice watched in horror as the van slammed into Bella's side with a deafening thud. She watched the girl slam into a light pole and hit the ice head first. As she continued to slide, the girl blinked to stand on the ice as the momentum continued to carry her until she executed a surprisingly graceful shoulder roll up onto her feet. The entire thing would have been comical as Bella had glared a NGRILY at Tyler's van during the whole ordeal, but the ice was smeared with blood, Bella's blood. There was a brief pause and then everyone was breaking into action. Bella swayed as her eyes fluttered and she went to pass out, landing limply in Rosalie's arms of all people. Alice would smile later when she really took the time to realize Rosalie had nearly exposed them to get to Bella first. By the time the rest of them had reached Bella, barely containing themselves to move at a human pace, there was a dense crowd of students around Bella, whose head was cradled in Rosalie's arms while she tried to assure everyone she was okay. "Bella, you're bleeding," Alice whispered. She couldn't even smell the blood but she could see it slowly staining Rosalie's blouse. "Just a scratch, I'm okay. Nothing broken. All is well," Bella grunted, her words slightly slurred. "She has a concussion." Edward frowned, her eyes were hazy and unresponsive. "Carrot." Bella reached somewhat blindly for the carrots clutched tightly in Alice's fist. She'd forgotten all about them and she grimaced as Bella tried desperately to put the carrot in her mouth. She could see the annoyance flash in Rosalie's eyes and she feared he might drop the girl if this continued. "How about we take you home and have Carlisle come check on you?" Alice offered quickly. Bella licked the carrot and she knew the girl was struggling to concentrate. "Oh, Petal," Bella slurred and then she was out. Rosalie smacked the girl awake. "Ouse," Bella slurred as she licked more at the carrot. Emmett sprung into action as he scooped Bella from Rosalie. Wincing at the sharp look the blonde gave him before they were walking to Edward's Volvo, they moved quickly in the chaos as they loaded Bella into the back and rested her head in the lap of Rosalie. Alice immediately got on the phone to call Carlisle and Esme, and Emmett eased his way over the curb to get out of the parking lot, following Edward. Anna glanced up as she heard Bella choke to see Rosalie angrily ripping the bag of carrots from Bella's hand. "Luu," Bella whined as she desperately pawed at the air for the carrots. She smiled despite the situation as Rosalie angrily held one carrot in front of Bella's face to lick at. Edward felt bad for the poor girl. He was sure she'd suffered more head trauma from Rosalie constantly slapping her awake, but it was needed. They couldn't let Bella sleep until Carlisle checked on her for sure. Emmett carried her in the house just in case she remembered any of this and questioned why Rosalie was able to carry her around like a pillow. "Oh dear. Poor girl," Esme cooed as she immediately began cleaning her wounds. Hello, Angel, Bella slurred as she rubbed at Esme's cheek, who only smiled as she let the girl continue. You're quite beautiful yourself, sweetheart, Esme chuckled. She'd congratulate Rosalie when the time was right and she wouldn't try to murder Bella to prove a point. Lou, Bella whispered as she grasped blindly at the air. No, Rosalie huffed. She'd never hated baby carrots in her entire existence until that very moment. Bella had barely even licked the carrot most of the time. She was just licking her fucking fingers. ND that had done things to her she did not fucking appreciate. She hadn't even realized the girl's tongue was so fucking long and nimble even with a clear concussion. Bella whined rather pitifully and Esme fought the urge to hold the girl and coo, she was so adorable. Shut up, Rosalie grumbled, crossing her arms. She would not and could not allow Bella to get to her because the girl shouldn't be a ting anyway, and she wasn't about to have her fingers licked again for all to see. More importantly, she was not about to allow Bella to sit there and lick anyone else's fucking fingers. By the time Carlisle arrived, Rosalie had gotten to slap Bella awake a few more times, which pleased the blonde immensely. He of course assured them that the Tyler boy was okay, but Rosalie didn't care as she wanted tea. Oh, smack him with the van so he'd have an identical dent on the other side of it for all of his troubles. Alice giggled as Carlisle continued to engage Bella in her slurred ramblings. She called him an angel like she had Esme. Goddess. Keeping Lou, Bella slurred softly and Carlisle glanced at her in confusion. Rosalie won't give her any more baby carrots, Edward explained with a chuckle. He swore He saw a faint smile on Rosalie's lips, but it was gone before he could attempt to confirm the sighting. She'll be okay, a few nasty bruises that will fade in the days to come and a bit of a nasty concussion. The cuts in her hairline were already cleaned up and tended to, so the only thing now is for her to rest and recover slowly. I'll have to check on her periodically to make sure she's getting better and not worse, Carlisle noted. I'll call Chief Swan, Esme noted just as Alice went into a vision. He's not here, he went to a workshop in Tacoma. He'll ask if she can stay with us, Alice chirped as she clapped her hands excitedly. Her first time at the house and Bella was already sleeping over. I'll call him anyway. You and Anna get Bella's keys and grab her some clothes for a few days or so, Esme noted. Rosalie, dear. The blonde vampire in question did nothing but give her mother figure a questioning glance. Perhaps you should go clean up, the maternal woman noted as she glanced at the blood from Bella's bleeding head. She watched her eldest daughter grunt and disappear up the steps, but not after giving Bella a careful glance. Bella, who was too preoccupied with fighting off Alice and Anna to notice how quickly she'd moved. Bella, we need your keys, Alice giggled. Can't have my goods, Bella slurred as she held Alice and Anna away. Victoria chuckled as she reached over and slipped the keys out of Bella's pocket. Red robbed, Bella declared as she waved a feeble fist at Victoria, who handed Alice and Anna Bella's keys. All in love, little bird, go to sleep, Victoria cooed softly. Bella nodded and fell asleep without prompting. Edward sighed and lowered her so she was spread out in the couch. Jelly is the best, isn't she? Emmett grinned at his parents. She is something special. I imagined she'd have far more damage, Carlisle noted. She hit a pole, landed on her head, slid across ice, and somehow in all of that managed to execute a perfect shoulder roll up and onto her feet, Jasper noted. It was more coordination than most people possessed, and she'd done it with a concussion as if it was second nature. Maybe it is, Edward noted, and he nodded his agreement. If she was sigh as she seemed, then maybe she'd learned over the years to recover with the least amount of damage to her persons. She was an amazing human. Oh honey, don't lick the couch, Esme cooed lovingly as Shish. He pushed Bella's impressive tongue back into her mouth. Most of the time, Edward chuckled and he nodded in agreement. Esme smiled softly as she watched the girl that had captured her entire family slept peacefully in the room that had quickly been dubbed Bella's. She had no doubt that she would join the family one day, as the last bleeding human Rosalie had held without prompt was Emmett, and he was a vampire now. It was a stretch. She knew that, but after 3 days of Bella while the others were at school and Carlisle was at work, she'd fallen in love with the girl in the way only a mother could fall in love with her child. The girl reminded her of a baby at times. She was so adorable and awkward, but there were times when she said things that reminded her that Bella was in fact a teenager. It was honestly the best of both worlds, and she loved to see the others interact with Bella. She seemed to draw them all in somehow and provide them each with something they didn't know they were missing as far as she was concerned. Her favorite though was to see Rosalie interact with the girl, because it was quite obvious to Esme she was interested in the girl. A mother knew these things. She wanted to coo every time Bella mumbled about Rosalie's glare being the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. She'd initially worried it was the concussion speaking, but the others quickly assured her otherwise. Of course, Rosalie didn't like to actively acknowledge she was her daughter too, but she knew when her own child was struggling with their feelings about something, and Esme could see the inner turmoil. She hid from the others so well, so she let her be. Rosalie would find her when she needed to. Today wasn't about any of that. Bella still had small symptoms from her concussion and therefore she needed to take her with her to run errands in Port Angeles since she couldn't go back to school yet. Just thinking about Bella's accident brought a frown to her face, because since the day she'd informed Chief Swan of the accident, he had yet to call back and check up on his daughter. She knew he was a good man, that cared about the people of Forks, but it was clear he was not the nurturing or father type. Which, as much as it wasn't his fault because not everyone was, it wasn't fair to Bella either. Shaking the thought from her mind, she reached over to softly massage Bella's scalp. Her bruises were practically gone and her cuts were healing rather fast, but she still handled the girl with care. "Bella, honey, wake up," she cooed softly. The girl was a relatively easy person to wake up when she slept well. But she was also difficult to corral. She watched the brunette stretch out, her joints releasing an orchestra of pops that sounded awfully painful to her, as she reached down to rub Bella's side softly. Piercing pale blue eyes looked back at her, and while they still stole her breath, she didn't worry. She knew there were humans that eye colors lightened and darkened in time with the seasons. Due to the amount of sunlight, and Bella was apparently one of those humans. In a bit they'd be back to that piercing and exotic silver. "Go shower and get dressed. Breakfast will be ready when you're done," she informed the girl. "Food?" Bella rasped, her head tilting in an adorably feline way as she looked up at Esme. "Yes, we're going out in public, so put on pants," she smiled. Bella had a clear ing for basketball shorts in the house, but she wasn't about to bring her outside when it was drizzling and cold in a pair of basketball shorts. "Po," Bella nodded. She smiled fondly at the concussed girl and left to go make breakfast. Of course, whatever it was would need to be bite-sized because Bella was not good with cutting her own food currently. Bella made it down the stairs in light gray jogger sweatpants. They weren't overly baggy, and Esme knew that was the only reason Alice had packed it. She wasn't surprised to see Bella wearing a fully matching outfit because, according to Alice, Bella's aimed to put her clothes away in premeditated outfits, which would seem excessive, except all Bella needed for something to be considered an outfit was for it to be comfortable and match. The abundance of black she wore helped with that, but it was still surprisingly stylish. Alice and Anna had been somewhat surprised to see Bella's wardrobe seemed to only consist of bras and boxer briefs. There was not a panty in sight. Esme didn't quite care. She supported the girl in anything she chose. They did not need to judge her when they were overstepping boundaries and invading her privacy just by buying in there without her knowledge or consent, despite their good intentions. Of course, now that Alice knew Bella's style, she was eager to go shopping to fill Bella's closet at the Cullen house with clothes because they thoroughly enjoyed Bella's sleepover. Even in her concussed mumbling, where she made less sense than she already did on any regular day. She set the food down in front of Bella with a smile and kiss to the girl's head, not bothering to fix herself a plate. None of them had eaten around Bella yet, and she had yet to make comment on it, and she wasn't about to unnecessarily scarf down human food. She took the plate when it was clear Bella was contemplating licking it again and piled it with more food. She ate a ridiculous amount of food, but youth and good genes were clearly on Bella's side, judging by her physique. Still toned and perfectly muscular, as if freshly sculpted by God himself. After the third plate, when Bella looked less likely to attempt to lick the plate, Esme cleaned up as she listened to Bella hum the song, "You Are My Sunshine," as she did so. It was their routine, as she did not trust Bella to not play in the water rather than rinse the dishes to load in the dishwasher. She locked up behind she and Bella before climbing into her Mercedes-AMG S63 sedan, silver to match Carlisle's black one. She pulled out the garage, the radio on low, as Bella was still suffering. Earring headaches and loud sounds seemed to be the most common trigger for her. The drive into Port Angeles was peaceful and she'd almost forgotten Bella was in the car until she was unfolding from the ball. The surprisingly flexible girl had put herself into sleep. She had fretted over Bella's constant sleeping until the others had assured her it was not a product of Bella's concussion and simply Bella always trying to sleep. She led Bella around the cloth store, appreciative of the quiet company as Bella dutifully followed her around. "Ooh," she heard Bella mumbled and turned to find her thoroughly invested in a shag cloth swatch. She smiled watching the girl sniff at it then crinkle her nose. "Yours is better," Bella huffed as she turned to Esme. She liked the woman, she reminded her of Ms. Nan back in Phoenix but more motherly and less grandmotherly. The woman had been taking care of her since the accident and feeding her the best food she'd ever tasted. She was the best like that. Bella wanted to give her things. She didn't know what things, but things nonetheless. Esme waving her along caught her attention and she quickly followed. She was still a little foggy on the upstairs but she'd had enough concussions over the years to know that she'd be fine by tomorrow and ready to head back to school. She did have to admit that this was one of her worst ones. It also wasn't the first time she'd been hit by a vehicle either, but she knew better than to divulge that information. It took some time but Esme was expecting it. Bella had this adorably low whine going and she was starting to let her curious hands wander. She reminded her of a well-behaved 2-year-old, quiet and cordial up until the point they got sleepy or hungry. She smiled and fished the blow pop out of her handbag. Alice discovered the giant jar in Bella's room and quickly deduced Bella had a hell of a thing for blow pops. "Yes," Bella mumbled softly as she kissed Esme's cheek and took the blow pop, content to silently follow Esme around again. They were in the Home Depot when she discovered a different side of Bella she was sure none of the others had ever witnessed. She was eyeing paints while Bella was further down the aisle distracted by something she'd seen. "Any luck?" a gentleman in his early 30s questioned. He was a good-looking man with a healthy head of hair, and clearly took good care of Hi's physical body judging by the way his dress shirt pulled against his chest slightly. "I'm getting there." Esme was a polite woman and while she seemed to be deemed the most approachable out of her family, it still wasn't as often as most people considered it. "Me, I don't know what I'm looking for. I've got white bedroom walls that bore me. I'm trying to pick a color and convince myself that I'll find time to paint it this upcoming weekend." "And how is that going?" "No such luck." "I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe you can pick it. I hardly know your taste to do such a thing. Maybe you can get to know it over dinner," he offered. She blinked because it was a rather smooth transition she would admit, but she was not at all surprised by the turn of the conversation. They rarely ever went a different way. None of that surprised her. What did surprise her was the lazy "no" that came from directly behind her. She hadn't even noticed Bella had approached them, but more importantly she'd never heard such nonchalant hostility in her life and she'd known Rosalie for nearly a century now. The man jumped and he looked thoroughly annoyed as he looked up at Bella, but all color left his face before he was quickly backtracking, turning around and retreating. Her eyes widened as she looked up in time to see Bella situating her sunglasses back on her face, place a kiss on her face then return to whatever it was that had distracted her when they entered the aisle to begin with. Part of her was curious about it but having spent the last 4 days with Bella had taught her that the girl was different and apparently when ready, far more intimidating than a vampire. Rosalie huffed with a roll of her eyes at the eagerness of her siblings at the sound of Esme's approaching vehicle signaling the return of the idiot swan girl. She resented the girl with everything she had because she was locked in a vicious cycle. She was not fickle with her emotions, she felt a certain way about things and very rarely changed them. That was not the case with Bella. She felt an array of emotions for the girl and the dominant one always fluctuated which annoyed her immensely. The girl was attractive, she could admit that. She wasn't the first human she found attractive and probably not the last but they were very rare and far between. The girl also annoyed her, for a myriad of reasons but those same reasons she found also oddly charming which annoyed her even more. The lack of disregard for her personal safety with the way she completely ignored her glares was not something she appreciated either. How she found it endearing that the girl thought even an expression like that was beautiful. More importantly the girl was human and she did not appreciate the blatant disregard to the rules about her interactions with humans because they were doing a terrible job at playing human. The door opening was what pulled her out of her thoughts, glancing at the door as Bella entered with a popsicle in one hand and a bouquet of red roses and pink stargazer lilies in the other as she studiously held the door open for Esme. "Hi Bella," Alice chirped happily, abandoning Jasper's lap. "Hi Allie," Bella grinned, dropping a kiss on Alice's head. She'd changed Alice's nickname as she said it had far too many syllables and she was lazy. "Esme bought you flowers?" Victoria questioned as she eyed the bouquet. "No, I bought them for Rosalie," she replied as she studiously handed a shocked Rosalie the flowers. "Esme bought me a popsicle," she added as an afterthought to Victoria. "What, no flowers for me?" Alice pouted. "Rosalie is special. Next time," Bella assured her. Edward wondered if Bella was intuitive enough to know that Rosalie wouldn't have accepted the flowers if Bella had shown up with a bouquet for everyone. That she needed to be treated different. "Time to play games, Jelly," Emmett declared, effectively changing the subject and allowing Rosalie a window of opportunity to escape with her flowers carefully held in her hand. "You're going down," Bella informed the giant vampire. You suck at video games." "Only when my brain is foggy." "Is your brain still foggy?" "A little bit." "Good, I'm glad you're getting better." "Yeah, Mom takes good care of me," Bella nods. Jasper smiled at the burst of love and happiness that came from Esme's office. She really had fallen in love with Bella and he was sure she was already the favorite of the house. "Not likely," Edward scoffed. He chuckled but said nothing. Edward always did have a thing for the color green. Bella returned rather unenthusiastically to school. She did not miss it, but Carlisle had given her a clean bill of health, so she had no reason not to go. Today she also had to go back home because Charlie was coming home, so she had no excuse as to why she needed to stay at the Cullen house anymore. Of course these were all reasons they needed. Bella didn't care and she knew Charlie wouldn't give a fuck either. "She lives," Eric Dikla read the moment he saw her enter the lunchroom. "I live," Bella nodded, taking her seat. Esme had packed her lunch and she was fucking hungry despite the big breakfast this morning. "So what happened? They said you didn't go to the hospital." Of course Jessica would already know all this stuff. "Bella hates hospitals, so we took her home for our dad to check her out." Alice smiled as she slipped into Bella's lap, giggling as the girl grumpily readjusted her so she was no longer blocking her food anymore. "So what was the verdict?" Mike questioned, between Alice's sunny disposition and Bella's innate ability to simply draw people in. The others had warmed up to Alice relatively well. She had that nasty gash in her head, a few bruises, and a pretty nasty concussion. "My dad says it could have been a lot worse," Alice explained, clearly upset by the whole thing. "Yeah, I for sure thought you'd break something with the way you hit that pole," Ben added with wide eyes. "She wouldn't have minded, right Bella? More time to play house with the Cullens, right?" Lauren sneered. "Esme is the best," Bella shrugged, as if not reading the malice hidden in Lauren's words that made Alice frown. "I'm impressed though," Lauren noted. "How so?" Bella questioned curiously, her arm moving to hold Alice, who was being assaulted by flickers of a vision as if she was struggling to tune into the right station. The vision came clear only moments before the words left Lauren's mouth for Alice. "Rosalie too. I didn't think she'd want sloppy second or thirds, or however many it is now. But I guess a slut just has a way of getting even the bitchiest people to fall for her." Lauren sneered. She was so over the hero worship the brunette seemed to gain in endless droves. It was more of an insult to Bella, but it didn't register as such to the brunette, who had Alice up and out her lap in a split second as she reached across the table and lifted Lauren up and out of her seat, proceeding to drag Lauren across the food-laden tab until she was nose to nose with an unhappy Bella. "Keep her name out your mouth, understand me? I hear you say her name, or I even get the inclination that you're thinking her name, I'll make you wi. Shish, you didn't know what it felt like to swallow all your goddamn teeth. Are you threatening me?" "Oh, I don't make threats." Bella pulled back, a look of utter disgust on her face. "Now, take your seat and keep your mouth shut," Bella added, shoving the girl back across the food-smeared table and into her seat. She led a stunned Alice back to her family table before disappearing into the parking lot. "Holy fucking shit," Emmett whispered in awe. Those were Rosalie's sentiments exactly. She considered Bella to be oddly weird and mild-mannered, but clearly that was not the case. Apparently she was wrong, especially when it came to her, as if she needed defending, especially not by a human. but she had to admit that her attraction for the girl had raised its annoying little head during the dispo. And she wasn't so inclined to beat it back with a baseball bat like she normally would this time around. Part of her wondered if Bella had even registered the clear insult to herself at all, but say not to dwell on it, or she would do a lot worse to the human than embarrass her in front of a cafeteria full of students. Ms. Lindsay was the one to show up and led Lauren away, asking what happened, but getting no real and definitive answer. "You like her now?" Edward questioned incredulously. "I found her display charming." Rosalie shrugged. She didn't need to explain it to him, she'd never seen a human move so fast, and she'd lifted Lauren clear out of her seat by the collar of her shirt like a rag doll. She could see all of Bella's muscles bunch, coil and roll with every movement like a sensual dance. "There is something terribly wrong with you," Edward declared as he turned wide-eyed to Rosalie. "Whatever," Rosalie grunted with a roll of her eyes, "the man was a prude anyways." Blank. Alice sat in art class frowning. No one had seen Bella after lunch and she was not answering her phone. Her mind was reeling with the fact that she'd somehow managed to have a vision of Bella. Well, technically it was an indirect vision of Bella, but it was something. She had a feeling though that indirect visions and those feelings were all she was ever really going to get from Bella's future unless Bella chose otherwise. She was no Peter and his weird knowing shit, but she wouldn't be a good clairvoyant if she couldn't have feelings about things because she could predict well, now would she? So focused on her inner musings she didn't notice the door open halfway through class until a hand was resting on her shoulder. "Don't worry so much, little one," Bella mumbled, as she placed a kiss on Alice's temple and took her seat. "Where did you go?" Alice mumbled, happy to see her friend present. "Took a nap." "Where would you?" "Never mind," Alice mumbled with a shake of her head in awe because Bella was back to her usual or unusual, depending on who you were talking to, disposition, and that was all that mattered. Alice smiled as the familiar tingling sensation danced up her spine, indicating the impending vision which she happily let overtake her after it being gone for so long. Bella smiled at how giddy Alice looked, the smile crawling and then growing on her face as her eyebrows rose in surprise. Even with all the emotions that danced across her face, her eyes were blank and unfocused. It was the second time today it had happened, but Bella kept quiet and let Alice do her thing. She personally thought that she was doing a lot better with reading the people around her. Rosalie was good practice though, she figured if one could read Rosalie then one could read anyone. Alice smiled brightly as she looked up at Bella, excited to see her vision play out. She didn't know Bella had such a dominating side to her, but then again Bella wasn't actually what she would call submissive by any stretch of the imagination either. In most cases Bella seemed just content to be until she was clearly provoked, someone that was clearly perfect for Rosalie because Rosalie would chew up and spit out a submissive type, but she also wouldn't stand for a constantly dominating type. "Why so bright, sunshine?" Bella smiled and Alice's smile seemed impossibly brighter. Bella's nicknames were so adorable and endearing without trying to be. She and Emmett had an amazing gift. "You're the best friend a girl could ask for." "Nah, I think you've already got the title secured." "Pretty sure your trophy is in the mail and on its way." Bella winked with a smile. Alice wondered if Rosalie truly comprehended how fucking lucky she was to have someone like Bella pining after her. She'd be jealous if she wasn't so completely and utterly in love with Jasper, and even still she was still kind of jealous. They walked out of art class after Alice hung around for Bella to explain her tardiness to their teacher. It was all bullshit from Bella, but showed Alice Bella was indeed very good at lying and getting out of trouble. Due to their hold-up, the hallways were nearly deserted by any and all students. At that moment Principal Richmond turned the corner and zeroed in on Bella, his pace picking up just as they exited the door leading to the parking lot. "Ms. Swan," he yelled, bursting through the doors. Alice turned eagerly to watch her vision unfold before her eyes. "Yes?" Bella questioned, her head tilting curiously as she eyed the somewhat heavy-set man with thinning hair, but not Ow for him to give up and just go bald yet. "I've been looking for you. There needs to consequences for your actions earlier against Ms. Mallory. Don't upset me with such petty bullshit." "Excuse me." "You're excused." A bully got what was coming to her. She should be lucky I was in such a happy mood before she opened her stupid little mouth. It could have been far worse. Remember that before you pursue this anymore. Choose your words wisely, what you say next will dictate the way the rest of this school year continues. You've seen my file, haven't you? Yes, well I'm sorry to hear you were being bullied. We have zero tolerance for behavior like that, of course after such treatment anyone would snap in such a way. Thank you for your time Ms. Swan. Enjoy the rest of your day. Likewise. Bella nodded before she spun on her heels and led Alice away. She nearly giggled at the lustful gaze Rosalie wasn't even bothering to hide as she eyed Bella. What's in your file? Alice questioned. Curiously she'd been burning to ask the question the moment Bella had mentioned it in her vision. The utter look of dread and fear that had plagued the principal's face the moment Bella had brought it up piqued her interest. Let's just say swallowing a few teeth would have been the least of Lauren's problems. Bella winked, that dark look passing through her eyes that reminded her so much of Rosalie when she got dangerous. Were you a problem child, B? Victoria smiled. I think the phrase Mrs. Girardi used just before she quit was a walking prison sentence, Bella shrugged. That bad? Edward was having a hard time believing it with what he'd seen from Bella. Worse, but I was an angry and confused kid with very little self-esteem. It happens, Bella shrugged. Why? Emmett frowned. He didn't like the idea of Bella being anything but happy. An answer for another day my friend. Bella smiled, patting his shoulder and waved to the others before Rosalie got any more impatient with her. I'm taking you back to your house, Rosalie informed the brunette coldly. Just because she appreciated the taller brunette's actions did not mean she needed to treat her any different and encourage her family's behavior. Thanks, I miss Riley, she noted. She hadn't gone this long without her car in a very long time and she felt guilty for it. With her driving, it wasn't long before she was pulling into the driveway behind Bella's car. Bye. See you tomorrow and thanks for the ride, Bella announced as she moved to slip out of the car. Her body reacting before she could even think to stop it, her hand shot out. To still Bella's retreating form who turned to give Rosalie her unwavering and undivided attention even as she snatched her hand back as if Bella had burned her. She glared at the brunette albeit intentionally as she simply just refused to react to the sensations that simply touching Bella, not even skin to skin, had caused. I suppose I should thank you for defending me today, Rosalie noted, He didn't sound very thankful but she simply refused to fake it now that she was mad with herself for having touched Bella again. She seemed to forget herself every time she touched the damn human CH was ridiculous to her because she didn't like fucking touching to begin with anyway. She watched the brunette chuckle and shake her head as she opened the door to step out before stopping and locking her silvery gaze with Rosalie's golden one. Your name spoken with anything less than the respect it deserves is unacceptable. The word struck a chord with the blonde vampire and her gaze softened. There was so much conviction and devotion spoken with those words that she faltered. I'll always uphold that, Bella added before she shut Rosalie's door and headed for her front door. The blonde vampy re-watched her disappear inside before she pulled away in a daze. No one had ever protected or vowed to protect her name like that before. Hell, Rosalie wasn't sure she'd ever done it for her own name. It wasn't because she lacked self-worth, because she definitely did not. If you asked Edward, she had too much, but that was because she'd turned him down before he'd gotten the chance to turn her down. And it was a rather large blow to his ego even all these years later. If there was anyone that could beat her out in the self-love category it was a one Edward Cullen. Either way she'd never thought of her name like that. Didn't really revere it the way Bella seemed to and it warmed her. It was different from watching Bella handle that idiot girl like a rag doll or the way she even shut down principal in his terrible attempt to reprimand her. That one had spoken more to her beast but this one spoke more to her and it annoyed her. Not you too Hale, she snapped as she glared at herself in the rearview mirror. She refused to go down that road. She was not about to get involved with a fickle human because she was better than the rest. No, she refused to join in. Yet even as she tried to strengthen her walls they seemed weaker than ever before. Bella pulled in behind Charlie's cruiser with something akin to annoyance but not quite it. It was Saturday morning for starters and she'd been woken up before fucking 9 in the morning to come spend the day down at La Push before being allowed to spend the rest of the weekend over at the Cullen house. She did not want to be here but Rlie had gotten it into his head that she was best friends with Jacob Black because she'd spent every summer playing with the boy. She denied it, but Charlie didn't think so, and maybe he'd have an argument if it wasn't for the fact that he was best friends with Jacob's dad, and that immediately meant she had three immediate choices of friends: Rachel, Rebecca, and Jacob. Rachel and Rebecca were angry and bratty twins that Bella wanted no part of, so that only left Jacob. Anybody else she hung out with during those summers were all introduced to her by Jacob as they were his friends. It really was common sense with all things considered. They weren't best friends, just friends by circumstances. It's not to say Jacob wasn't a good friend, but friend had stopped being Jacob's preferred word the moment puberty had hit them all. Bella wasn't so dense as to not recognize the impending crush, and coincidentally that had been the last time she'd been to Forks since then. Picture her miffed when he returned nearly 5 years later to see him blushing and grinning at her like he did back then. Of course, if Charlie wasn't so dense about things like that, he'd probably tell her he didn't approve for obvious reasons that only they were privy to in this lovely town named Forks. She frowned at that thought. It was no secret in Phoenix, nearly everyone that knew her knew, and there were no real problems. But Forks was not Phoenix, and no matter what the man said, Bella knew he was embarrassed and didn't care for it. There was a logical reason Charlie wasn't involved with anyone else, not just because he was still hung up over Renee. It was simply the more noble of the two reasons. Bella suddenly felt tired. She didn't want to be here. She really hated being around Charlie or Renee for elongated periods of time. No fault of their own really, other than that they were terrible liars. She may not be good at reading people, and while she's getting better at it, thanks to a certain blonde, she could always see right through her parents. So she knew when they were lying, and they lied to her constantly, but they lied to themselves too, and she wasn't sure what bothered her more about the whole thing. That's what this was. One big lie to himself, and she was being forced to participate simply because she lived under his roof. Just like how she'd be forced to participate again in about 3 weeks when she had to go back to Phoenix for Thanksgiving break because Renee simply just didn't know how to let go and move the fuck on. Hands dragged against the front of her jeans as her tongue darted out to unnecessarily wet her lips before she took a heavy breath and stepped out the car. The moment she stepped out her car, Jacob was bounding over to her. He was still as massive as ever at his full 6'8" height, but he had always been tall for his age, so she hadn't thought twice about it when she saw him that first night. It was the muscles though that had given Bella pause. She was a gym rat, the C. Ullens knew that now, so she knew a lot about muscle development, and saying Jacob's muscle development was unnatural for his age, diet, and activity level was putting it lightly. The high temperature he ran around with alone would ensure he'd burn it right off if she ignored the fact that a temperature that high that radiated off of him would put anyone else in the ground. She could make an argument for steroids with the way he looked and the way his moods had hopscotched that first night, but she knew better, although he wasn't as buff back then either. "Bells, I missed you so much," Jacob declared as he pulled her into a giant hug. She fought the urge to strangle him. Despite the way she was with the Cullens and a handful of people back in Phoenix, she did not like being touched. He put her down after a while, frowning a little at her lack of enthusiasm. Hi Jake, how's it been going?" she questioned with an awkward nod, stepping back and creating space between the two of them. Did the devil decide to jump back into him and he get the urge to hug her again? Just like that, he was rambling on about his dad's old truck that he was restoring. She eyed the old rusted Chevy truck with pity. She'd restored Riley, and this was not that. "Hey, was that a 1973 Plymouth Hemi Cuda I saw you get out of earlier?" Jacob questioned eagerly. 71, actually, but yeah, she's mine." "Who did the work? She sounds like a dream." "I did. Took me a couple months, but she was worth it." "No way, you know cars." That's where they spent most of the morning and afternoon, in Jacob's garage working on He very tragic story that was this rusted and dilapidated 1953 Chevy 3100 pickup truck that used to be red at some point. She was constantly wavering between the urge to send it off the cliffs on fire, only to be doused out and then drowned by the ocean it would land in, never to be seen again, or breathe new life back into this truck until it purred her name in thanks and ecstasy. Of course neither of these were options for her, as it was not her truck, but she could help, and if she was forced to be over here more often, then it's all they would do. That way she could ensure Jacob wouldn't fucking try and touch her. It was Embry and Quill that showed up to inform them that lunch would be at Sam and Emily's house. Who the fuck were Sam and Emily? Bella didn't know, but she was fucking hungry. She also noted the similarities between Jacob, Quill and Embry, although they were both about 4 inches shorter than the boy. She followed them down the road, keeping polite conversation and expertly avoiding Jacob's not-so-subtle attempts to hold her hand or brush up against her. The house was decent-sized and filled with tree-sized Native Americans. Quite honestly, she'd fit right in if it wasn't for her pale-ass skin and silver eyes. She was even taller than their tallest girl, Leah Clearwater, a bitch, and not the fun kind, just the angry kind. She was introduced to all of them and she was thoroughly unimpressed, especially with the way Paul kept eyeing her and the not-so-subtle way Jacob kept growling at him and trying to stake claim. She fought the violent urge to bash his head in. There was only one person she'd ever let claim her, and it sure as fuck wasn't him. Emily was nice, a sweetheart really, which is why Bella sat and ate the less than stellar food she'd cooked for her. Part of her wondered if that was why the rest of them scarfed down the food as if it would bolt at any given moment, but they seemed to be genuinely enjoying the food, so she kept quiet and shot off a text to Alice. __. Esme. Alice giggled as she skipped down the steps. Yes dear. Esme questioned, eyeing her middle daughter curiously. She'd been less than amicable after finding out Bella would be spending the entire day down in La Push with the wolves, although it was thankfully not as violent of a reaction as Rosalie's had been. Bella says to quote, "Cook all the food, cause this shit just not right," end quote. Alice recited, handing over her phone for Esme to see when she gave her an unappreciative look for using such crass language. Let her know that I'll get right on that. Does she know when she'll be coming by? Esme questioned as her mind started taking inventory of what they had and what she could make for her youngest. She says she's leaving after the bonfire tonight. She's hoping she'll be here by 9. Is she at least enjoying herself? Esme questioned, rolling her eyes at the unhappy growls that filled the air at the thought of her somehow enjoying spending time with the wolves. Ah, Alice cooed as she eyed Rosalie, who curled her lip in distaste. Rosalie did not like cooing of any kind as she was no baby. Bella says she misses Rosalie's glares. And there's a truck she has mixed feelings about. What? That's not fair. Rosalie is meanest one to her and she misses her. Emmett whined, video game now forgotten. It's because I'm prettier, Rosalie smirked. Esme smiled. Because Emmett was right, Rosalie was unbelievably mean to Bella, but it was clearly their thing because Rosalie touched Bella, even if it was just to shove her into something or tr. It the poor girl, and every time Rosalie growled, glared, or cursed at Bella, all she got in return was a goofy and adorable smile. It warmed her heart every time she witnessed them interact. She impatiently anticipated the day Rosalie would admit the truth to herself and embrace her well-deserved happiness. Blank. Bella eyed the bonfire curiously. She'd burned a low tea of things over the years, but she'd never burned driftwood before. She really liked the effect the salt caused within the fire itself. She was a bit of a pyromaniac, she could admit that. She had no reason to, but unless she was on a plane, she always had one of those mini blow-torch lighters on hand. At first she used to have a pretty cool Zippo, but after being popped with a wooden spoon one too many times by Ms. Nan, she'd learned her lesson and gotten the mini blow-torch instead. Ms. Nan just didn't like how much she played with the Zippo, and it was hard to do trick with a mini blow-torch. It also didn't help that she played with it in school too. There was more food at the bonfire, but she refused to touch any of it after being offered a half-charred hot dog. Right now she just wanted to head back to the Cullens' house. Of course that was not the case, because it would be impolite to leave before Billy could tell the legends of the tribe. Sure, she'd agree if they weren't the same legends she'd heard every time she came to visit Charlie in the summers. The bonfire was something new though. They were usually told the legends when they all slept over Jacob's house as a bedtime story. She listened to Billy tell the legends as if it was her first time hearing them all over again. The man just had a way with telling the legends. It was the equivalent of reading your favorite book over and over again. You knew everything that was going to happen, yet still you reacted each and every time as if you'd never read it before. Billy's storytelling was a lot like that. When he got to the story of the Cold Ones, nearly all eyes were on her. They were clearly trying to be subtle in their staring, but were doing a horrible job at it. Except they weren't just staring at her to see how She would react, but more like they were imploring her to realize something. This whole trying to read Rosalie was really making her better at things like this. This legend was actually one of her favorites to listen to. Billy's voice was more raw, the emotions more real in this story than most of the others. When it was over, they tried to get Charlie to practically force her to stay. Bullshit. Oh. How it was late and dark out and unsafe for her to be driving at this time of night. Really, Charlie, it's for her safety. It'll be like old times, Jacob bargained. She rolled her eyes. Charlie had but so much control over her. Good night, Dad, I'll see you Monday night. She waved at him before she was rising and heading for her car. She was stopped by hot hand gripping her arm. Her eyes were slow. As they moved to the hand on her forearm. It was a male hand, certainly not Jacob's though. The forearm was a touch on the hairy side and the rest of the arm was bulging. He was tall and standing close to intimidate her, but Bella didn't get intimidated. Finally her eyes landed on the face of Sam and one of her eyebrows slowly raised in question. It's safer for you if you stay here, Sam rumbled. It was phrased like a suggestion, but it was a clear-cut command. More importantly, it was a mistake. Bella stepped closer, and despite Sam having the height advantage, he felt like Bella was looking down her nose at him. No, she stated. Her tone held a kind of lazy aggression to it that Sam had never witnessed before or thought possible. Her silver eyes glinted in the darkness, because November meant it got pitch black around 6 at night. They looked more alien than attractively exotic in that moment. It's safer for you if you remove your hand before I do it for you. Her voice still dragged lazily yet aggressively. But it was the look she gave him that had Sam pulling his hand back slowly in fear that any sudden movements wouldn't end well for him. Those once exotic silver eyes that he found so attractive now glinted in the moonlight like a giant ass knife of a serial killer before he stabbed his victim to death 43 times or some shit like that. He knew she was human, despite how weak her scent was even to their noses. They could smell her, and it was an intoxicating scent and very much human, but it was a difficult scent to pick up without burying their noses in the source, and even then. Because it disappeared quickly and every other scent clung to her in seconds, drowning out her own almost immediately. Even with that knowledge, he could see the predator in her eyes that she hid so easily, as human as she was. It was clear to both Sam and his wolf that she was dangerous. Promises that if she ever did cross the plane into the supernatural, there was a chance no one could handle her if provoked the right way or wrong. Depending on who was on the receiving end. Bella watched him take a step back and dip his head. It wasn't an apology but recognition that he did not want to provoke her anymore. Because it was in his best interest. Bella gave an approving nod before she was turning on her heels and walking away, effectively dismissing Sam and the others. It wasn't road to find her way back to the black house and hop in her car. Ms. Nan had always taught her to pay attention to where she was going so that she could always find her way back to safety. Blank. There was an audible sigh of relief the moment the sound of Bella's quickly approaching car met their ears. Alice was eager to go greet her best friend, but there would be an plausible explanation as to why Alice would be out there when Bella pulled up. Of course that was despite that they'd already done some not-so-human stuff and Bella hadn't blinked twice, so she stayed inside. They heard Bella pull into the driveway just as Purple Rain began to play. Oh man, I miss Kid, fucking Trish, Bella grunted, and then she was singing along with Prince, with a surprisingly melodic voice. Jelly can sing, Emmett noted with wide eyes. Being vampires meant they had alluring voices, and by extension they could all carry a decent enough tune if need be, but singing was a skill or a vampire just like it was for a human, and as such they appreciated good singing, and Bella could actually sing. They could hear the door to Bella's car open and curiosity got the better of Alice. Ho opened the front door for them all to see Bella singing as she did a simple two-step, her hips swiveling in time to the music, and Rose got the feeling that Bella could dance just as well as she could sing, and she was decently impressed. Alice giggled as Bella danced her way to the trunk to grab her duffel bag during the guitar solo, before Bella was once again ad-libbing right along with Prince. Her duffel bag gripped to her chest as she swayed and sang. She didn't think Bella's voice could go that high considering the soulful yet raspy voice Bella had. It wasn't a male-sounding voice by a stretch, but it was definitely lower on the register of female voices. Then Unpredictable by Jamie Foxx began and Bella was once again singing, to her car this time as she danced. What is happening? Anna mumbled in awe. She wondered if Bella often broke into spontaneous concerts in the middle of the night. It's Bella, Edward smirked as if that was the answer, but then again, it really probably was. Thanks Riley. I needed that, Bella mumbled as she finally shut off the car, giving it a loving pat goodnight before locking up and heading for the front door of the Cullen house, realizing they were all standing there watching her. How much of that did you witness? Bella questioned sheepishly, her hand reaching up to awkwardly scratch the back of her neck. All of it, Alice chirped happily. Right, Bella grunted. Nothing to be ashamed of, sweetie. I enjoyed the mini concert, Esme smiled. Thanks Mom E. Bella smiled a goofy smile as she leaned over to drop a loving kiss on Esme's cheek. Sorry I'm late. Jake and his buddies were trying to convince Charlie to make me spend the night instead of coming here, Bella huffed, setting her duffel bag down and following Esme and her nose to the kitchen, missing the wary looks the rest of the Cullens gave one another. Really, what for? Esme questioned, keeping the nervousness out of her tone. Well, Sam said I'd be safer there, Bella rugged, grinning at Esme as she sat the plate of chicken parmesan down in front of her. I told him it'd be safer if he stopped touching me. He touched you? Rosalie demanded. It was one thing to have those mutt stench clinging to Bella, it was another to know that they'd put their grubby little paws on what was hers. She ignored Edward's wide-eyed look. Now was not the time, hell it would never be the time to talk about her epiphanies with Edward. That's why she fucking left the house. Any reason they would say something like that? Edward questioned. It was a suspicious sounding question. They needed to know if the wolves had exposed them, as it would be a direct violation of the treaty. Probably because they turn into wolves and you're vampires, but I'm no mind reader, Bella shrugged nonchalantly as she continued to eat. Blank. No one moved for a long time, Bella deciding it better to serve herself seconds rather than bother Esme at the moment. Which one of them told you? Victoria demanded. None, at least not really. I've heard all those legends for as long as I could remember. Didn't really believe in them, but the similarities were pretty obvious, Bella shrugged. You've known this entire time? Alice squeaked. Yeah, of course, Bella nodded. They good job of hiding their ways in public, but in private that was a whole other situation. She did dumb shit. She wasn't a dumb person, they practically had a neon sign blazing over their heads the moment they stepped into their house. What? Emmett declared. Are you serious? You know how nervous we are and you still come to our house? Rosalie demanded. Yeah, you're all still great people, and this was great chicken parmesan, simple shit. We're vampires. No, you're a person, species is vampire. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. We kill humans, is that not what you are? You feed from animals, correct me if I'm wrong, and humans kill humans too. Trust me, I've seen it happen. Do you not recognize how dangerous this is? Rosalie hissed. It felt like she was no longer talking about Bella hanging with the Cullens, but more about her and Bella and their push and pull undefined relationship. That's what it was. Bella was there and she'd push at Rosalie's boundaries, the walls around the blonde's heart, all the while dutifully scaling it, and sometimes the blonde would pull too, urging her closer until it was all too much and she was pushing away. Bella wouldn't give up though, she'd be right there with the blonde waiting to start the process back all over again. She was hers though. The blonde had accepted that much. It was impossible not to though, because Rosalie the vampire had made the claim. It was the blonde, outside of primal instincts, that was having trouble accepting any of that. Sensing the change, Bella stood wiping her mouth with a napkin before moving until she was toe-to-toe with the fuming blonde. She was taller but incapable of ever looking down at the vampire. Don't care. Life's dangerous. That doesn't mean you actively seek it out. I'm not. You're in a house full of vampires. Nah, I'm in a house full of people I like spending time with, they just happen to be vampires. You're suicidal. Once, not anymore, Bella shrugged, and with that admission the whole atmosphere of the room changed. You were suicidal. Alice squeaked as she then to hug Bella, who had returned to her food. A long time ago, Allie. Bella smiled down at her softly. Why? Alice was almost sorry she asked because of the bitter laugh that left Bella's mouth. My NTS hate me and I was dumb enough to care. I don't understand, Alice mumbled. Charlie is a good man, Carlisle noted. He is, which is why I'm alive now, but his conscience as a police officer doesn't change the fact that I was not what they wanted. Never was and never will be, Bella huffed. Why not? You're amazing, Alice huffed and Bella smiled with a nod. I am amazing, but I'm a mistake as well, or at least that's what my mom thinks even though she'd never say it out loud. Bella shrugged as if she didn't care, because for the most part she really didn't, but it didn't change how much it simply just sucked. Is it because you like girls? Victoria questioned. Bella hadn't explicitly come out and told them, but she wasn't hiding it either. They wish it was just that. My mother, Renee, is pretty open to things like that, things that are different, but I guess I'm too different. Bella laughed that bitter laugh again that Alice was really beginning to hate. Then why? Anna questioned. Renee want Dee to be surprised with the gender of her baby when she was pregnant with me, Charlie went with it. Everything else was a surprise, so why not the two, right? I was born and they sure as hell were surprised. Charlie was there to see me come out, he screamed boy, and the doctor came back and told him mostly girl. Renee wanted to do the surgery to make me fully female, but the mortality rate was 2H. For Charlie to be comfortable with it, so they didn't do it. Now, here I am living as the freak I was born to be. No, Esme's voice was stern and demanding. You are not a freak, do you hear me, young lady? You are beautiful beyond words. Charming, with the biggest heart I've ever seen, but you are by no means a freak. I never want to hear you talk like that again, am I understood? Yes ma'am, Bella smiled wryly. Ms. Nan had given her a bit of the same speech, a wooden spoon had also been involved. Alice squeaked, looking up sheepishly as Esme smacked her on the arm. You won't see anything, Allie. I'm all tucked up. Bella chuckled with a shake of her head as she returned to her food. They asked questions and Emmett made jokes and Bella was herself once again. She was confident in who she was. But it always seemed to disappear when she was telling someone about herself for the first time, the rejection of her own parents ingrained into her thoughts even though no one she'd ever trusted to divulge such information with had ever rejected her. Blank. What did I do? Bella questioned because Rosalie was still glaring at her. The blonde in question I didn't respond, instead choosing to stand and grab Bella by the back of her shirt and drag her outside and into the backyard. Rosalie had the most sensitive senses out of the entire family other than airing which was solely Esme's, and while the others could ignore the clingy smell of the wolves, she could and would not any longer. You smell like wet dog-infested trash, she simply informed Bella bef. Or she turned on the hose on the poor brunette. Fuck, Bella yelled, shooting to her feet as the cold water hit her. It was already fucking cold out considering the time of year. Rosalie, Esme hissed, disappearing to go grab a big enough towel for Bella, who was struggling to get out of her now soaked clothes. Fucking hypothermia, Rose, Bella hissed as she finally yanked of all of her clothes, and raw CED into the warm Cullen house, shivering. Rosalie only smirked before cocking her eyebrow because she could now easily make out Bella's extra appendage in her wet boxer briefs, and it was nothing at all to be embarrassed about. Along with a well-defined midsection. Bella followed Rosalie's line of sight and shrugged. I'm a grower, not a shower. A second golden eyebrow rose to join the other because now she was curious. Thanks, Esme. Bella grinned as she let the matriarch lead her away. She knew that look and she was as proud as a peacock. Rosalie wanted her body. You like her? Emmett grinned, wiggling his eyebrows suggestively. Shut up, Rosalie huffed with a roll of her eyes as she quickly disappeared out the back door. That's a yes, isn't it? Emmett questioned. Oh yeah, Victoria nodded with a chuckle. A big fat yes, Carlisle chuckled as he returned with Bella's wet clothes in his arms and grabbed her duffel bag as he headed for Bella's room after dropping her clothes in the laundry room. It was such a big fat yes. I warned you guys that I'm not one for much angst, so if you feel like it's moving too fast, just now it's not. It's not a crazy long chapter. I felt like it jumped around a bit, but I'm not sure. Someone asked for a schedule and right now I'm doing a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday upload until it ends. No special time as of right now. If this does well and you guys ask for it, there will probably be 2 more books. I may just post it anyway though. Read and review. Let me know what you think. Most importantly, enjoy. Emmett glanced at Bella nervously. We're going to be in so much trouble, Emmett mumbled as he glanced at Alice. Next time, you send the human to bed instead of playing video games with her until we literally have an hour to get ready for school. Edward huffed with a roll of his eyes. She said she wasn't sleepy, Emmett defended. She's an insomniac, of course she wasn't sleepy. That's why you send her to bed, Anna replied. Even now Bella was fighting sleep. Bella, wake up, Alice giggled. Apparently Bella was a nuzzler when she was sleeping, and the taller girl had somehow contorted herself into a positio. And so she could dig her face into Alice's side. Top feeling up, Bella slurred as she burrowed further into Alice's smaller side. I'm not feeling you up, you're feeling me up, silly. Pope, maybe we show. I'll give her one of those energy drinks, Victoria offered. Almost immediately Alice was smacked with a vision of Victoria prying a wide-eyed and rambling Bella off a tree behind the school. No, Edward declared sharply. Under no circumstances are you to give her any kind of energy drink. What did you see? Jasper questioned. Edward felt frightened. Bella imitating a koala bear on crack, Alice giggled. I kinda want to see what that looks like, Emmett noted. No, Edward hissed. Jasper, can't you give her some stuff to help her out? Emmett questioned. The guy was walking Xanax. No, Bella has to actively allow me to influence her emotions, Jasper noted. But Alice can get visions of her. It's like Carlyle said, my power is intrusive and it's not passive. We're lucky Bella could even fig. You're out how to let Alice see her now, Jasper pointed out. Really, she couldn't be fucking human. Blank. Sunday after waking Bella up had been like a crash course in a things vampire for the brunette human. She'd learned that Edward could read minds, Jasper was an empath, Alice a psychic, and Rosalie could see physical weaknesses. Bella had been thoroughly impressed. Said with their powers and then proceeded to inform the blonde that she was not surprised that Rosalie was a secret warrior goddess. The compliment had earned her a wry but somewhat bashful smile from the blonde vampire that the others wisely chose not to comment on. It was during that conversation that they had somehow figured out a way to let Alice see Bella more. No one knew exactly how it worked, and it could not be duplicated, for Edward and Jasper's influence was really circumstantial. Bella had to be actively open to letting Jasper feel what she was feeling or letting him influence her. But either way it was still very watered down, as if only a fraction of his power was getting through. Carlyle reasoned that it was because Bella was in fact human, and as such, her brain couldn't operate at the capacity required to actively channel the full potential of her likely shields. Then came the conversation no one really wanted to have, the consequences of Bella actually knowing their secret. Rosalie had not appreciated how well Bella had taken it that her life was forfeit because she'd heard the right legends growing up and made the connection. They had told her all about the Volturi. And while they were on very good terms with the Italian rulers, they tried their best to uphold the law. Bella had simply told them she understood, no one had done anything wrong, but life wasn't fair sometimes, and she'd come to accept that. She had simply asked them to let her graduate high school before they tried to figure out when and how to change her. Looking back, Alice was sure they were more upset with the way things had worked out than Bella was. She was always so unbothered by things. Edward had even went into one of his self-deprecating rants about them being monsters, but Bella shook her head and looked at him with wisdom beyond her years shining in her eyes, and told him that monsters weren't a species thing but a personal one, because she knew some monsters and they were just as human as she was. It reminded them that Bella had a past that none of them knew much about other than parents who couldn't appreciate the daughter they had. Blank. Rosalie pulled into the spot next to Edward's Volvo just as the warning bell rang for the morning. The parking lot was relatively empty, as most students often headed inside after the first bell because there was not enough time between the warning bell and the late bell to go to their lockers and then head to class. People glanced at her a bit surprised, as it was very rarely that she and her siblings did not arrive at the same time, but she'd taken a run up into Canada to clear her head because spending elongated time around Bella was seriously messing with her. She really tried to block her asinine growing feelings for the human girl, but it was very hard to do with Bella constantly in her face, being Bella. The girl was too attractive for her own good, and the way she seemed to ship everything about Rosalie made it hard to hate the girl. Her own vanity playing heavy part in that. Yes, she knew. She was awkwardly charming, yet she had moments where she would either say or do something that would have had made Casanova himself green with envy. She already blended impossibly well with the family, which annoyed Rosalie more because even when Bella wasn't there she was hearing about Bella. Rosalie huffed. Trying to keep Bella from her heart was like building a wall covered in quick-growing vines. She could build them as high as she wanted, but eventually the vines would outgrow the walls and find their way to her. She wasn't sure why she fought anymore, but she was stubborn and refused to concede. Maybe she wouldn't fight so hard though. Bella was going to be a part of our life no matter what, and she had already proved herself beyond loyal to her family. So engrossed in her thoughts she was barely aware of Emmett pushing something on her, not trusting the oaf in the East bit. She pushed against the weight, hearing it thud on the ground next to her feet. Looking down she found a practically asleep Bella looking up at her with bloodshot and delirious eyes. She hasn't slept since Saturday. We might have kept her up all night. Alice is going to make an excuse. Bye, Emmett whispered too quickly and quietly for any human to hear as he disappeared around the corner, leaving her with Bella, who didn't look like she knew which way was up or down, and she nearly did walk away, but Esme and Carlisle had unfortunately instilled enough consciousness in her to know it was wrong, plus Bella looked rather sad. "You've got to be kidding me," Rosalie hissed as she reached down and pulled Bella up to her feet. She was tempted to just sling the girl over her shoulder, but there were cameras in the parking lot and she'd be hard-pressed to explain that to anyone, so she slung Bella's arm over her shoulder and forced Bella to walk with her back to her car. Unwisely she shoved Belle in the passenger seat of her BMW and immediately regretted it as the brunette flopped over partially into the driver's seat and started wiggling around in an attempt to get comfortable. "No," she led as she dragged the girl back into a sitting position and put on her seat belt before heading around and slipping into the driver's seat and heading back home. Pulling into the driveway of the house, Rosalie stomped around to the passenger side. A wet noodle had more stability than Bella's entire upper half on the ride home. Glaring at the annoying human, she opened the passenger door and proceeded to practically drag Bella out of the car, now only in her socks because Bella had decided to kick her sneakers off during the drive back. Esme watched the door open as Rosalie dragged a practically unconscious Bella into the house. Carlisle stood at the top of the steps, wincing when Bella's head hit the door frame with a solid thunk. "Shut up," Rosalie hissed, cutting off the pitiful whine that left Bella's mouth in protest. "What's happening?" Esme questioned. "Apparently the rest of your children forgot that Bella the insomniac needs to sleep," Rosalie huffed as she half-dragged Bella up the steps. The girl, having enough bearings to get to her feet and secure herself to Rosalie so that she was only being half-dragged up the stairs. "Where are her shoes?" Carlisle questioned as Rosalie headed for her own bedroom. He hid his smile at that but winked at Esme. It was quickly hidden at Rosalie's answering growl and the slam of her bedroom door. "Rawr," they could hear Bella slur at the blonde. "Shut up," was Rosalie's answering hiss. "I'll call the school," Carlisle chuckled. "We'll have to dictate a bedtime from now on when we go hunting," Esme mused, and Carlisle nodded with another chuckle. Placing a loving kiss on his mate's lips. Blank. Rosalie glared angrily at the ceiling, now stuck in the bed because Bella had managed to drag her to the bed and win her long limbs around her, and while she could detach the annoying human, she did not want to hear Bella's whining and whimpering while she did it. Instead she resigned herself to reading while ignoring the fact that Bella was using her breasts as a pillow, with her arms wound tightly around Rosalie's waist and their legs a tangled mess, her heels laying haphazardly on the floor by her bed because somehow Bella had managed to get them off while she was securing herself to the blonde vampire. She didn't like thinking about the fact that she'd been outmaneuvered by a half-asleep human, but there was so much fucking limb flopping it was like trying to cajole a drunk octopus that mistook itself for a koala bear. It was in this position that Rosalie noticed how soothingly slow and steady Bella's heartbeat was. Despite being unable to hear it, the heartbeat was not a weak one, it was rather powerful, and if she closed her eyes and pretended it felt like it was her own. Blank. At some point she found her fingers gliding through Bella's thick yet silky hair, her nails just barely scratching her scalp on each pass-through. It earned her breathy sighs and a few nuzzles, which would have been fine if not for the fact that Bella was nuzzling her breast. She'd barely suppressed a moan, and it would have been smart to just stop playing with Bella's hair. Except she couldn't bring herself to stop. Despite herself, she often found herself tracing the profile of Bella's face while she slept. She looked like a sleeping angel. Her eyebrows were pretty anima. Ted for a sleeping person twitching ever so often. Her pouty lips, softly parted showing off a bit of her dimples as her breaths danced across Rosalie's chest. Bella was a great cuddler, which meant that every now and then Bella would practically grind against Rosalie's leg in attempt to bring them impossibly closer together. Thankfully she could not feel Bella's member pressed against her, or she wasn't exactly sure what she'd do. It was interesting to Rosalie. Despite everything, she was happy that her family were not the type of vampires to stay cemented in the time and mindset of when they were human. Bella having a penis hadn't changed any of their outlooks on the girl, except for Alice scrapping any skirts or dresses she would have attempted to force the brunette into, because the girl had made it clear she did not like the looseness and the lack of security those articles of clothing provided for her. The guys already kind of saw her as one of them because of the way she acted, and Bella had agreed with this assessment. She was a tomboy kind of girl. Emmett was more than happy with this way of thinking because it made the girls against boys teams finally even without forcing anyone to sit out. Personally, Rosalie was a bit curious about it. It had added an extra exotic flavor to Bella, but she kept that to herself. Blank. Rosalie noted the moment Bella began to wake up. There was a subtle uptick in Bella's heartbeat, barely noticeable, but it was still there. Bella let out a sigh and nuzzled further into the blonde's breast, who was doing her best not to moan because she had sensitive fucking nipples and Bella's nose seemed to have a nipple magnet. Dazed, Rosalie watched the taller brunette yawn, all of her limbs stretching before she was nuzzling again. This time Rosalie growled in a mixture of annoyance and frustration, because seriously. The growling seemed to capture Bella's attention as she looked up into the quickly darkening eyes of a one Rosalie Hale. There was a pause as darkening butterscotch stared into pale blue eyes, slowly adjusting to their normal exotic silver hue. There was no movement, but it was the fastest Rose Allie had felt Bella's heart pound in her chest, and then there was a flurry of movements. Bella scrambled up Rosalie's body as the blonde pulled the brunette up her body until their lips were meeting in a heated kiss. It was a frenzied kiss, yet no real battle for dominance occurred as tongues clashed and explored foreign territory. Bella settled between Rosalie's legs, her hand reaching down to the blonde vampire's leg over her hip as she managed to flip them in one clean move. Rosalie pulled away, thoroughly impressed as she cocked a golden eyebrow at Bella, who only shrugged before she was leaning up to reclaim the blonde's lips. This kiss was less frenzied and more of a slow burn, tongues caressing and softly exploring rather than clashing and looting. It was during this kiss that Rose Allie developed a complete understanding for how long and dexterous Bella's tongue really was. Bella's lips were even better in practice than they looked, which was hard considering that they already looked pretty damn good. Rosalie bucked as Bella's hands slipped from their place on her waist to her ass, pushing her entire body further into Bella's own. She had to give it to the girl because Bella knew how to kiss. There was no need to break apart because Bella was breathing through her nose and Rosalie was selfish enough to not want to end this unnecessarily. It was their kissing on her bed that she let a little bit of her fight go. The sound of her siblings approaching cars is what pulled Rosalie away, because this was not something she wanted to share with anyone just yet. Bella looked up at her confusedly. Her eyes the darkest she'd ever seen them. The others are on their way home. She said it but did her best to convey what she really meant. She needed things to go slow if she was going to fight against years of habits. It could not be rushed. Okay, Bella nodded and she could see the understanding that she nearly felt unworthy of. She kissed the insufferable girl one last time before she was out of her bed, leaping the balcony and disappearing into the woods. Had she have stayed, she would have witnessed Bella struggling to get out of the bed and waddle her way across the hall and into her room, heading straight for her bathroom. Fuck, Bella whined softly as she yanked her pants off, her erect member bent in such a poor position causing her a great amount of pain. There was a groan of relief as her member sprung free, sticking off from her body and slightly curved upward. Her mind was reeling as she stepped into the shower. She'd kissed Rosalie Hale, technically she'd made out with the goddess vampire, and while she ran, Bella understood why. No way would Rosalie admit her feelings to everybody that easy. Bella was fine with that though. She'd go as fast as her blonde bombshell wanted to go. Especially if the kissing was like that. This was a mostly fluff chapter and a hint into Bella's past. This is a short one, so be warned. If you guys are interested in a Bellix Emmett pairing, there's a story on my sister account. Dancing Warrior Goddess Teen Assassin checkout or not. See you guys next week. Thank you so much for the reviews and support, means a lot. Read and review. Let me know what you think. Most importantly, enjoy. Blank. Bella walked upstairs to her room absolutely bored and annoyed. All of Tuesday morning had been spent assuring everyone that she was in fact fine and it was just a really bad headache that had caused the fainting. The highlight of her day came when Rosalie had tripped her on the way to art class with Alice. She'd grinned at the blonde who had only smirked and disappeared around the corner. Alice had then promptly informed her that she shouldn't be enjoying being bullied this much. She thought it better to keep her mouth shut than inform Alice that all contact from Rosalie was good contact in her book. She had then come home to a disgusting house, forcing her to clean, do the little homework. She had then head to the grocery store to restock the nearly empty fridge. Only for her to come home and cook for both she and Charlie and eat in silence in the kitchen while he ate in the living room in front of the TV. Only having enough decency to come during one of the commercial breaks to drop off his dirty dishes for Bella to wash. Charlie was a good chief of police, good friend. But he was a shit person and the whole thing had put Bella in a real shit mood. All of those thoughts, disappeared when she spotted her own angel perched on the tree branch outside her window. She was quick to lock her door before quickly crossing her room to open the window. "Why didn't you just come in?" Bella questioned as she stepped back to give Rosalie space to slip in. "Your room. Your invitation." Rosalie shrugged awkwardly. Bella reached over and softly grabbed her hand before leading her to the bed to sit. "Nah, not my room." Bella mumbled as she pulled out a pair of basketball shorts and a t-shirt. "What is it then?" Rosalie questioned curiously as she watched Bella begin her workout routine for the night. "A temporary dwelling place. You don't like being here. Define here." "Forks. Nah, I love it. I hate being here in this room, this house." "Is it really that bad? My dad's never called me his daughter, not even his son. I'm just his kid. When I'm here he never acknowledges me. The reason I spent summers is because his best friend asked about me constantly and then it was Jacob. He wanted me to go to La Push that day because again, his best friend's son wanted me to come, no other reason. The real reason Charlie won't get involved with anyone else, it's because he blames himself. Blames himself. For me being messed up. You're not messed up. Tell him that. The sperm cell determines the sex of the baby and he thinks his are messed up, which is why I came out the way that I am. As far as he's concerned, he's doing the world a service by not knocking up any other unsuspecting women with messed up babies. He's an ignorant fool. No doubt, my birthday is coming up real soon. I won't be surprised if he starts dropping hints about me either moving out or going back to Phoenix. Was Phoenix better? With my mom? No, worse. At least Charlie ignores me. Renee liked to lie to herself about being a mother that could love despite of and put the both of us through unnecessary bullshit. But I wasn't with her much. What do you mean? I've got to go back to Phoenix for Thanksgiving break. My mom likes to pretend and she wants me there. There are people I want you to meet. People who gave me a home, helped me be the person I am today. Gave you a home, she kicked you out. No. I had a run-in with one of Renee's boyfriends and I met them that way. You're not make any sense. What run-in? How ironic is it for a kindergarten teacher to date a registered sex offender for 6 months and have absolutely no clue? What are you saying? He picked me up from school one day. Renee had parent-teacher conference so she was going to be late and she asked him to watch me. He'd been watching me already, and I didn't like it very much. He NTED to help me take a shower because I'd broken my right arm trying to teach myself how to ride a bike the week before. There was no real saying no and he was none too pleased with him finding what he found. He yelled at me, cursed me out then left, and I thought that was it. He came back while I was getting dressed mumbling about removing the problem. He cut me pretty deep but I managed to get out of there. Flew out the back door, grabbed my bike and just pedaled. I ended up in the more diverse, I guess you could say, part of Phoenix and there was this group of older kids beating up on this kid while this older girl our color was standing off to the side crying. I didn't think, just jumped in, broken arm and all, but between me and him we sent them running. He introduced himself as Jamal, the older girl was named Trisha. Jamal noticed me bleeding, gave Trisha his bike and told her to go straight home, propped me up on the front of mine and rode me to his grandaunt's house. That's how I met Ms. Nan. Her name is really Gloria Hart, half Jamaican and half Dominican born, raised in Brooklyn, New York, nothing but tough love and a gift for all things edible. Rosalie did her best to control herself. She'd never met the woman, but she loathed Bella's mother with every fiber of her being, because she had practically gift-wrapped Bella for a sexual predator. Everything in her screamed to who? NT the bitch down and make her pay for endangering Bella, and then the sick fuck who had the audacity to take a blade to Bella. She consoled herself with the knowledge that Bella had managed to get off. And in the process managed to punch her way into meeting someone who would do a better job of caring for her. She chose not to dwell on the fact that Bella could have very well died helping out that boy. Okay, the blonde nodded. Okay, I'll come. I'll probably be on a different flight than you. My mom's not going to pick me up, I'm supposed to take a taxi, I'll wait for you. Don't tell me that, I'll hate your mother more. Which is hard considering. Yeah, Phil's not so bad, although that might be because he doesn't know. Seriously. He just thinks I'm making a fashion statement. My situation is something Renee would give an arm and a leg to keep a secret. It's not a situation, she growled. Bella frowned, dropping from the pull-up bar attached to her closet door and wiped the sweat from her arms with a towel. Hey, what's wrong? You looked equal parts murderous and devastated when I told you about that stuff. Did I upset you? I didn't mean to, Bella noted as she kneeled down in front of Rosalie on her bed. The blonde vampire scoffed. Bella had nearly been raped and forcibly castrated, and she was concerned with how she'd taken the news. How old were you? She asked. How old were you when all this happened? 9. Yeah, I had just turned 9 inches. She almost regretted asking, and before she could stop herself she was talking about Royce fucking King III and everything that led up to her last moments as a human on this earth. Bella sat, her ears ringing and her heart raging, but she did not outwardly react. People did that sometimes, not realizing how much their reactions were making it more difficult for the person that was reliving it. Because, even though it had happened years ago, Bella could see that Rosalie was no longer in that room with her. He was back in that cold fucking alley in Rochester with a sick motherfucker and his buddies. So Bella held her hand so that when Rosalie stopped reliving she'd have a guide to come back to her. When Rosalie finished she looked at the wall behind Bella, a poorly painted lavender which she knew was not at all the girl's style but had probably been forced upon her. There was a sudden absence of light, though it had no effect on her vision. As Bella turned off her lamp, she let the taller girl shift her around until she was in her arms as Bella settled them into her bed, with Rosalie laying on top of Bella, chest to chest and their legs entangled. The blonde wasn't one to be taken care of, but this time around she let Bella do it. She was done fighting. It would be a slow process outwardly, but when it was just them she was done fighting. You made them pay, Bella murmured as she pressed a kiss to Rosalie's temple. It wasn't a question but a statement, because Bella knew her. I saved him for last, so he knew I was coming. I wore my wedding dress. I was bit dramatic back then. Bella grinned and she smiled because Bella was an idiot, but she was smart and she knew what Rosalie needed. Shut up, the blonde smiled as she punched Bella and earned herself a little grunt in return, which she kissed away. Go to sleep. Fine, Bella yawned petulantly and she smiled. This was okay, this she liked. Blank. Rosalie slipped from Bella's stronghold an hour before she knew the girl would have to wake up and get ready for school. She would never admit to herself how hard it was to pull herself from the bed because she was comfortable, in a way she hadn't been comfortable in a long time, because there was no pretending whatsoever. She was going to leave quietly, but decided she'd mess with girl a bit before she did. Bella's desk was immensely organized, as was the rest of her room, and it wasn't hard to find a piece of paper, pen, and tape. She quickly penned her note, adding a little personal touch as well before taping it to Bella's rather impressive and, if she was being honest, daunting tent. At some point in the morning, its rising had forced her to readjust her position for her own sanity. Bella's hands were already firmly planted on her ass, and apparently she liked that kind of thing. There was no way she could lay on top of the girl's erection too and think straight. The very fact that Bella could hold her weight was just another list to add to the growing lists of characteristics that was unique to only Bella. Bella woke up to an empty bed and empty arms, except there was a note taped to her morning wood. Her hand immediately shot to hide her now blushing neck back from non-existent eyes. As she eyed Rosalie's lipstick mark on the paper, she tried to not think of the blonde kissing the paper after taping it to her morning wood as she removed the note in question. As much as I enjoyed my ass being fondled all night, I needed to shower and change. See you later, Rose. Bella grinned. Bella was not necessarily an ass girl, she was an equal love kind of girl, but she did tend to say cure her hand to asses because it was not as aggressive of a sexual move as just full on grabbing someone's breast. Rosalie would quite honestly smack her upside the head if she did that out of the blue, and she did not want that. She'd suffered a decent amount of head trauma already, she did not need more. The end for today. Thanks for watching, and if you guys are interested for part 2, get 50 likes and 10 plus comments and I'll upload the part 2 of the story. Till then, do subscribe and check out the products I've added in comment box.